material just yet. You guys have a little thing on your end that gives us permission to record. And what I want to do today to start class is I want to start seeing if we can help you guys kind of dissect these test questions a little bit. We said the other day, I mean, unit 1, the first 6 units or so are, we're going to breeze through those pretty quickly. We're not going to spend all of our time in those. Yes, there's some complex terms, but 1 through 6 aren't heavily tested. So you may see a question or two, but I want to get through the material so we can get to the good stuff, the stuff that you are heavily tested. But I need you guys to start now learning how to read these test questions. So when we do get to the good stuff, to the heavily tested stuff, you're there. So kind of use units 1 through 6 as your learning ground, your platform for getting started. Does this kind of make sense? Use it to help build those study habits for when we do get to the good stuff. So again, turn with me, if you will, to page 17 in your book. Good morning. And if you're just joining us, good morning. We are page 17 in your book, and I just want to go through a couple of these together and share some tricks with you on how you might be able to get through them, especially when we get to the more complex stuff. So let's first look at number 1 on page 17. It says, which of the following best defines real estate? Well, let's think about what they're asking us for. They're asking for the best. Does that mean there could be another good answer? There could be another right answer? Yeah, but which one are they looking for in particular? They're looking for the best one. And I think a lot of these test questions can be approached this way. You may have 2 good answers. How do you know which one you choose? You find the better of the 2. I also think that for a lot of these, when you're reading these answer choices, a lot of times you can find one that is just so wrong. And if you can rule that one out early, now you've taken your chance, a 25% chance of getting it right. And now you've given yourself a 33% chance of getting it right. So if you can eliminate one that you know is just beyond wrong, then that's, of course, is going to increase your chances. So if we're looking at number 1, sometimes it may help, especially if it's a test question that you're stuck on or you're tripping over. Sometimes what I think is helpful is to treat each answer independently. So go through and read the question and then read A and determine, is A true or false? Then go through and read the question and read B. Is B true or false? C true or false? Do you guys see what I'm saying? So if you study each answer, and by the end, you're either going to have 3 trues and 1 false, or 3 falses and 1 true. And we're probably looking for the odd man out here, right? The right answer is going to be that 1 true or that 1 false. So if we do that with number 1, which of the following best defines real estate? Land in the air above it. Well, I mean, that one sounds okay, but let's see what else we got. Land and the buildings permanently affixed to it. Well, again, that sounds okay. We know these 3 ran together, right? Land and all things permanently affixed to it. Well, that kind of sounds more like real estate because we took land and then man add a structure to it, or land in the middle rights in the land. So we can go through and kind of dissect it. I mean, we just tore that question apart, didn't we? We went through and we studied A, we studied B. We kind of liked A and B. We didn't really like D, but which one is the best answer? The best answer, understanding the difference in land and real estate and real property, is C. So we just kind of went through, studied it, dissected it. We mentioned the other day that your exams are timed. So what you may want to consider doing when you're taking quizzes at the end of the units in the textbook, set a timer. Start now working with a timer. I suggest give yourself about 2 minutes per question. So if you were doing the unit 1 quiz, this is 20 questions. So set the timer on your phone for 40 minutes. If you can't do the unit 1 quiz in 40 minutes, you need to pick it up. If you blow through it in 5 and you fail, you can slow down. So you can kind of start treating these end of unit quizzes. Learn, test, pass, not so much. You won't be able to time yourself so much because those of you that have played around in Learn, Test, Pass, you'll know that a lot of the test questions it gives you then it gives you the explanation. So you're not going to be able to time yourself, but you can use that as a great study tool. Let's look at another one real quick. Still on page 17, let's look at number 9. What makes number 9 different is they have Roman numerals. I used to hate these. Oh my gosh. And I hate the word hate, y'all, but I used to hate these until somebody taught me how to read them. Again, we're going to treat Roman numeral 1 independently. We're going to treat Roman numeral 2 independently. So number 9 says the designation realtor refers to Roman numeral 1 says any licensed real estate broker. Do your head one way or another. Is that true or false? Are all realtors brokers? No. So Roman numeral 1 is false. Right out the gate, we've just eliminated A and C, haven't we? Just like that. Poof, A and C are gone. The designation realtor refers to an active member of the National Association of Realtors. Is that true or false? Does that make sense? So now we've determined that's true. So what's our answer on that one? Our answer is B. Now, obviously, you only get, about 2 minutes. You're not going to be able to do this for every single question, but start using this to get yourself in the practice. We decided the other day that several of us, it's been a minute since we've studied and taken a test. So use that dissection of the questions to get yourself back in that practice. And I promise you, the more you do, the more you go, the faster it'll go, the quicker you'll be able to interpret that to get you prepared for that end of class exam. Don't forget your absolute words too. We talked about those last week. Absolute words are words like always, must, never. There's not much wiggle room with those absolute words. How many of you have over the weekend were able to get into Learn Test Pass? Were you guys able to get in? Good. Guys, if you're not in Learn Test Pass yet, please go ahead and do so. Like I said, there is no rear view mirror in this class. We just keep going forward. So you guys are looking ahead before we come to class, and you're reviewing after class, and Learn Test Pass is a good tool for that. I almost always get asked, do we have to do everything in Learn Test Pass? And the answer is no. You don't have to do anything in Learn Test Pass. You don't have to access. You don't have to pick up your book. All you have to do is meet the attendance requirement and pass the test. Everything else we give you are tools to help you pass the test. So what you do with Learn Test Pass, what you do with your book, I just encourage you guys to not wait until the last minute, because this is a lot of information to dissect the weekend before your exam. So please, please, please start now if you haven't already. Me or Jane, and actually, Valerie, you should be okay. Check the tentative schedule and see what it says. Other questions or comments?
I have a question about Learn Test Pass. So I'm able to access it, but I think I'm just a little confused on once we get in, obviously it's the North Carolina real estate course that we need to click on, but do we need to purchase anything additionally, or is it just?
No, and okay. It sounds like, because when you get in, you should see something that looks like this. Yeah. So once you log on, this is okay. So you'll want to get with Jane. She's in the email. Okay. She's kind of our Learn Test Pass, our tech guru. Okay. And remember, there's that little tutorial video in the email as well that kind of walks you through. I'm guessing, just hearing what you said, I'm guessing you went to sign in or create an account, and the key there is you want to click on enroll for free. So all of that is in that little video, and make sure you follow those steps.
Okay, yeah, because I went back and I looked through my email, and I got the email that she had sent to me with all the information, but it doesn't mention Learn Test Pass anywhere. So I don't know if I just maybe deleted that.
It's the email you use to access this class. It's the email you use to access this class. Yep. I'll just there's a little section. Yep, there's a little section there on Learn Test Pass, a a video tutorial, and then the link that you need to click on it.
Okay.
And
great.
by the way, I do suggest when you guys are done with Learn Test Pass for the day to log out of it and not leave yourself logged in. Because if I add anything, if you stay logged in, you're not going to be able to see it. So just when you're done, log out. And that way, when you come back, you know you have current stuff. Other questions, comments? Let's see. Where are we? We've done that and that. Everybody's got their name changed, I'm guessing. Yeah, we're just moving right along. All right. So let's jump back into Unit 2, where we left off. Unit 2, and before we jump into Unit 2, remember, you guys, there's the real world, and then there's pre-licensing world. What world are we in right now officially? We just entered into pre-licensing world. I fear sometimes you guys, your experience messes things up, crosses wires or something up here. So please leave your experience off to the side. You gotta focus on the content and the material, whether or not it actually happened to you in the real world or not. Fair enough? I think that's what gets in our way most of the time. When I bought my house, this is what it did. Well, that's called the real world. I don't know when you bought your house. I wasn't there. I can't answer that question. And I can promise you, your experience from buying your house will not be tested. What's going to be tested? Now we're in pre-licensing world. Okay, so start making that distinction. So we left the other day talking about personal property and real property and fixtures. Why don't you guys remind me in a private chat? Everybody set your private chat. And why don't you guys remind me in just a couple words, 1 or 2 words, when I say personal property, what do you think of? Personal property. Personal property. What do you think of? Yeah. I'm trying to read really fast. Yeah, looks like we're good. Personal property is anything movable, right? A couple of you said we shared that image, that visual. Thank you for the previous student. If you take your house, flip it upside down and shake it, if it falls loose, that is your personal property, right? So you can, anything, you can pick it up and you can move it. When you sell your property, that's the stuff that's going to go with you, unless you and the buyer agree otherwise. Can the buyer and the seller agree to convey with the washer and dryer and the living room furniture and the car in the garage? Can they? Sure, absolutely. They can agree to whatever they want. The parties can agree to whatever they want. So we're just about done with our conversation of personal property and real property. If personal property is anything that's movable, then real property is anything that is not, things that are permanently attached, permanently affixed. And we need to talk, this last little piece of personal property and real property is about manufactured and modular housing. So manufactured homes may be real property, they may be personal property. The answer is it depends. If the manufactured home is on wheels, it has a hitch, and it has a title registered at the Department of Motor Vehicles, that is considered personal property. That's pretty personal, right? You hook it up to the truck and you can just move it right away. Once you take that manufactured home and you remove the wheels, you put it on some kind of permanent foundation, you remove the hitch, and you've canceled the title at the DMV, now you've converted that manufactured home from personal property to real property. Once you make it immovable and you cancel the title, You've converted that personal property to real property. So you're showing property, you're getting ready to list a property, and the lot has a manufactured home on it. The question is that considered personal property and real property? And the answer is, it depends. Does it have wheels? Is it on a foundation? What is the title situation with DMV? Manufactured homes. And then we also have modular housing. Modular housing are built in sections off-site. Maybe it's room by room, maybe it's floor by floor, but they're in a really big warehouse somewhere. They're built off-site. They come in section by section on the back of a truck. Once the builder assembles them on site, those sections on site, then they become real property. Questions or comments? Real property, personal property, before we put it in a rearview mirror. Okay. All right. Moving right along, Unit 2. This is the good stuff of Unit 2. Let's talk about an estate. We're going to talk, we got two different types of estates that we look at in this class. So we're going to talk about one now. When we talk about an estate, where we're just referring to the amount and kind of interest that an individual has in real property. What's your interest? What type, what kind of interest is it? How much interest do you have? When we're talking about estates, we're referring to the degree, the quantity, the nature, the extent of the interest. If you haven't heard me, when we're talking about an estate, we're talking about an individual's interest in the property. What kind of interest? What's the nature? What's the degree? In this class, we look at two different types of estates. We're going to look at freehold estates now. When we get to Unit 11, we're going to talk about leasehold estates, also known as non-freehold estates. Freehold estates are a state of ownership. What's your interest in this property? You own it. That's your interest. What about leasehold estates? What's your interest? You possess it. You have the right to live there. You've been given that right by your landlord. We will come back to leasehold when we get to Unit 11. We're going to put that off to the side for now. And right now, we're just going to focus on freehold estates in Unit 2. And you have a really nice chart in your book on page 29 that breaks down the different freehold estates. Now, we're going to go through these, of course, talk about each of them. What you're looking at in your book is the same thing you're looking at in your screen. Freehold estates can be broken down into two different categories. Either they're in states of inheritance, which means after the homeowner passes away, they can be inherited. They can be passed to their heirs. Or there's estates not of inheritance, which means once the individual passes away, it can't be inherited. So things are either inherited or they're not. And talking about the different types of freehold estates, the first one we have, the most common one we have, the one that you guys are going to use 99.9% of the time in your real estate career. Please don't write that number down. I just made it up. The one that you're going to use the majority of the time in your real estate career are freehold estates known as fee simple absolute. This is an estate of inheritance, which means when the individual passes away, it can be inherited. Fee simple absolute is the highest form of ownership. You can do whatever you want to, as long as you're not breaking the law, breaking the rules. You can't violate zoning. You can't violate restrictive covenants. We'll talk about both of those in Unit 6. With a fee simple absolute, there are no limitations. There's no restrictions. Particularly, there's no restrictions on time, how long you own it, or on use, what you can do with it while you own it. No restrictions. Again, you do whatever you want to, as long as you're not breaking any laws. The rest of these you may encounter once in your career. And before we get all stressed out about the rest of these, this next section, guys, this is what's given us just enough to be dangerous. Because this next little section, if you encounter this in your career, we're going to have to get an attorney involved. I'm not proficient. I'm not in law school. I'm not, I can't whip out my pre-licensing book and say, oh, this is what this is. So the rest of these, if you ever encounter one of these in your career, this is the case of where you need to know that we need to call for outside help. And in this case, that outside help is an attorney, because we don't have the ability to convey or assist in conveying these kinds of properties. So the next type of freehold estate is a fee simple defeasible, also known as a qualified fee estate. One of those things in real estate that we like. We got lots of things that have two different words, mean same thing. Good times. Fee simple defeasible estates have restrictions on use. You're limited on how you can use the property. You know this when you buy it. You buy it, it's in the deed, the restrictions in the deed, and you know when you buy it what the restrictions are. And it's pretty simple. You break the rules, you lose the property. So you can own this property as long as you want to, as long as you abide by the restrictions on use. Fee simple defeasible, restrict the use. Again, you know it when you buy it, it's in the deed, you were aware of it. There are two types of fee simple defeasible. The first one is fee simple subject to condition subsequent, because they made some of these words in there. Fee simple subject to a condition subsequent. And what this one says is that the owner cannot perform some action. You can do whatever you want to, but you cannot do this one thing. For example, there may be a restriction on the property that says no alcohol sales. You can do whatever you want to. But the moment you break the rules, the moment you serve one alcoholic beverage, you've broken the rules and you lose the property. The property is going to go back to the grantor. The grantor is the person that you bought it from. So you break the rules, doesn't matter how they find out. They find out you break the rules, the property goes back to the person that you bought it. They go to court, they take you to court, and the judge grants them re-entry because you broke the rules. You knew when you bought it, you couldn't serve alcohol. You chose to do it anyway. You lose the property through a court proceeding. Fee simple subject to condition subsequent. The other fee simple defeasible is called fee simple determinable. This says you can only use this property for one purpose. You cannot do anything else with it. You can only use it for one thing. An example of this might say you can only use this property for religious purposes. As long as you're using it for religious purposes, it's yours. The moment you do something non-religious on it, the property goes back to the grantor, the person that gave it to you. In this case, though, you don't have to go to court. Excuse me, the grantor doesn't have to take you to court. It's already been determined that when you break the rules, they get the property back. So one says you can only do one thing. The other one says you can do anything but one thing. Break the rules, lose the property. So let's look at an example together. A grantor, the person that sells the property, deeds the land to a school district for so long as the school district maintains a public elementary school on the parcel, and if it ceases to do so, this estate shall end immediately. It's pretty clear, isn't it? What's the one thing you can use this property for? Public elementary school. What happens if you stop using it for public elementary school? The estate ends and it goes back to the grantor. This is very similar to verbiage, what you're going to see in the deed. They don't leave room for unclarity there, do you? It's pretty dang clear what's going to happen. The district now has a fee simple determinable estate. If at some point the district does not maintain a public elementary school, then the title to the land reverts back to the grantor, or if the grantor is no longer with us, then it'll go to their heirs. Fee simple defeasible. Restrictions on use. You're limited to how you can use the property. Another type of estate is a life estate. Life estates have a restriction on time. You can use the property however you want, but you're limited to how long you can use the property. These are often referred to as partial life estates. There are three types of life estates, three types of estates that have a restriction on time. The first one is called a conventional life estate. This is one of the estates that can't be inherited. And what this life estate says is that the owner owns the property for their lifetime. When their life is over, the property goes back to the grantor or on to a named third party. This is why it's not inheritable. The owner only owns it for their life. When their life is over, their estate, their interest is over. Once the owner passes away, the ownership goes back to the grantor, or if the deed names a third party, it'll go on to them. Another life estate that's not inheritable, I guess I should say the other one that's not inheritable, there's only two that aren't inheritable. The other one that's not inheritable is called a marital life estate. This applies, we're going to talk about when married people buy property in just a second, so bear with me. But this applies to a situation where an individual owns property before they get married. So somebody goes out and buys property, they own property, and then they get married. And then that individual passes away. How much is the spouse going to get? According to marital life estate, it depends on how long were they married. They use their marriage as the yardstick for how much that spouse is entitled to. I think it says it uses something called the length of marriage approach. Yeah.
So the conventional life estate is not of inheritance as well, right?
Correct.
Okay.
Because with the conventional, when the owner dies, the property dies with them. It goes back. There's nobody to pass it on to. I see a few of you don't have your cameras on. I'm not sure if we're having technical difficulties or not. If you could let me know in the chat if you're here, but I can't see you and you're working on your camera issues. Question comes in, what about if one spouse holds the mortgage, but both names appear on the deed? That's exactly what this is for. Assuming the two didn't buy it together, right? We're going to talk, one spouse holds the mortgage. Yep. We're going to learn in just a minute when we talk about married couples. North Carolina is a spousal state, and I will talk more about what that means in just a second. The other life estate that we have It's called Life Estate pour autre vie. Did you guys know you're going to learn French today? Life estate pour autre vie means for the life of another. For the life of another. And what this estate is you have the life tenant, the person that owns the property, but then you also have the measuring life. The measuring life is the pour autre vie, and their life is the yardstick that will determine how long the life tenant owns it. The measuring life is the yardstick. So how long does the life tenant own it? It depends on how long the measuring life is alive. At the end of the measuring life's life, it will either go back to the grantor or it will go on to a named third party. There's a really good example. I love this example of this in your book on page 33. Top of page 33. It says, Austin owns a fee simple title to the property. He conveys a life estate to his brother Carl for the life of Carl's daughter, who has a major disability. Carl has the right to enjoy the ownership of the property and is the life tenant, but his daughter is the measuring life. Should the daughter die, Carl's estate will terminate and revert back to Austin or Austin's heirs. The daughter has no present or future ownership interest in the property. So clearly, Uncle Austin wanted to make sure that his niece had a roof over her head. And this was something that he designed. He said, okay, you guys can live in this house for as long as she's alive. You can own this house. You can do whatever you want to. It's yours. You own it. It's yours for as long as she's alive. Once she passes, it's going to go back to Austin. If Austin's no longer with us, if Austin's no longer with us, then it'll go on to Austin's heirs. So again, you guys, keep this stuff simple. Please don't get bogged down in this. We're not in law school. If you are getting ready to sell a house and the seller says, ooh, I got a life estate pour autre vie, stop. Let's talk to an attorney. I think I mentioned the other day, you guys, a big part of this class is teaching you guys to stay in your lane. We are not attorneys. We are not tax accountants. We are not appraisers. We are not home inspectors, surveyors, unless you are, of course. The rest of us are only real estate agents, and we've got to stay in our lane. Now, I've been going on and on about life estates, either going back to the grantor or onto a named third party. Back to the grantor and onto a named third party have official names. The remainder interest, if you have a remainder interest, then that's the third party, the remainder man. So at the end of the estate, it could go on to a remainder man. If it's going back to the grantor, it's a reversionary interest. You see the word reverse there? So we're going to reverse it back to the grantor. Remainder man is sending it on to a named third party when the life estate is over. Reversionary is when it goes back to the grantor. What we deal with the majority of the time is going to be fee simple, absolute. Anything else, CYA. Call your attorney. Or actually have your client call theirs. We've also been mentioned in this life estate. Let's talk, or I'm sorry, the life tenant. Let's talk a little bit more about the life tenant. Again, you guys understand the life tenant owns the property. So they can earn an income, they can profit, they can rent it out to tenants if they want to, they can harvest corn, they can earn an income. They can use the resources on the property. If there's a farm or an orchard. What they can't do is destroy the resources on the property. If there's an orchard, they can't just, destroy it because they don't want to deal with it. Somebody else is waiting in line for this property. So as long as they're maintaining the property, as long as there's not any waste, And again, they own it. So they're the ones that gets to pay taxes and special assessments and homeowners insurance and yeah. And in the life estate pour ultra V, that pour ultra V would be appurtenant. It's going to go from one owner to the next until that measuring life dies. Let's see, when the reversionary dies, this passed to the remainder. I'm going to go back for 1 second. I'll come back to this slide. I got a question on the previous slide. So when the remainder, let's see, when the reversionary passes, then it's going to go to their heirs. So when the reversionary passes, if they're not with us, if the grantor passes, then it goes on to their named heirs and their wills. Yep. The only way that a third party is going to get it is if they're specifically listed in the deed. The deed has got to say, Julie Campbell will get this, da, 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 da. That verbiage has to be spelled out. Yep. All right, back to our life tenants, what they can and can't do. Over on page 34, we're just going to mention this briefly. There may be something called a homestead. This is just a legal life estate that's occupied as the family home. Homesteads are protected from most creditors. Certain creditors or debits on the property, they may be protected. Some states, there's tax advantages. It talks about what North Carolina's tax advantages are on page 34. This is about all we need to know about this. We're going to bring it up again in Unit 3. Again, just as briefly, when you're dealing with a homestead, you may want to have your client get an attorney involved. Questions on estates? So if an estate is the type or the kind or the degree of interest that an individual has in the property. Up next, we talk about ownership. How do you own the property? We've already decided what your estate is, what your interest is, but now we need to discuss how you own it. And there are two types of ownership, severalty and concurrent. Ownership and severalty means it owned by one person or entity. Can I think on that for a minute? I've not had any experience with life estates in the real world. Everything I've ever done in sales is fee simple absolute. So ownership and severalty, you're the sole owner. It's owned by one person or entity, one business. Concurrent forms of ownership are owned by two or more. It could be 2, it could be 3, it could be 200. Concurrent forms of ownership are owned by 2 or more. Follow-up question. So do we just forward the client to an attorney and the attorney does a transaction? The attorney, we can still do the transaction. That's a good question. The broker can still facilitate the transaction, but the attorney is going to make sure that the legalities are taken care of it. That's why we need to refer. I can't interpret legal documents. So when my seller hands me this deed and says, what's this mean? I cannot interpret that because I'm not an attorney. And again, that's a big chunk of why we're doing here. We need to have a little flag go up. Ooh, we need to talk to an attorney so we know when to seek outside help. Yep. So concurrent forms of ownership, 2 or more. There are 3 different types of concurrent forms of ownership. I do wish they went in Tennessee by the entirety. I'll go ahead and tell you guys right now, it's for married people. Tennessee in common and joint Tennessee are for unmarried people. So at this point of the class, I get a lot of questions about what happens if we're married. Bear with me. I'm getting there. I almost wish they would do Tennessee by the entirety first, because I think that's the one that we're more familiar with. But they don't, so here we are. So Tennessee in common and joint Tennessee are for people that are not married when they take title. They're not married when they buy. And for first up, we got Tennessee in common. A distinguishing feature of Tennessee in common is that the ownership interest is usually unequal. No, we're going to talk about community property next. Yep. So your ownership interest is usually unequal. However, the owner has an undivided interest. So whatever their ownership interest is, they can sell it, convey it, mortgage it. With Tennessee in common, upon the death of an owner, their interest passes to their heirs. When the attorney creates the Tennessee in common, they're going to have this conversation. When something happens to you, what do you want to have happen to your interest? Did you guys hear what I said? When the attorney creates the Tennessee in common. So they're going to ask you, when something happens to you, what do you want to have happen to your interest? Yes. So let's look at a picture. Two people buy a home together. They decide the percentage of ownership. One individual owns 60%, one owns 40%. The 60% individual passes away. Their interest is divvied between their heirs. This is the best picture of Tennessee in common. Keep it simple. When an owner of Tennessee in common passes away, their interest goes to their heirs. Another form of concurrent ownership is a joint Tennessee. In joint Tennessee, ownership interest is usually equal. 4 people own it, 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. Ownership interest is usually equal. And in joint Tennessee, we have something called the 4 unities. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. But with joint Tennessee, all owners take title at the same time. They all appear on the deed at the same time. They're all there at the same time, all signing. You can't have a new guy come in later as a joint tenant. To create a joint Tennessee, we all have to purchase at the same time. If an owner of joint Tennessee passes away, what happens to their interest? The answer is, it depends. If they have something called right of survivorship, right of survivorship most simply is explained when you're talking about married people. Right of survivorship, you have 2 owners, owner A and owner B. Everybody see me? Owner A, owner B. When owner B passes away, their interest automatically goes to owner A. That's right of survivorship. If you have 4 owners, this one dies, it goes to the other 3. This one dies, it goes to the other 2. This one dies until we're down to 1. There are no heirs with right of survivorship. Nationally, right of survivorship with joint Tennessee is automatic. So you go to another state, right of survivorship is automatic. In North Carolina, it's got to be intentionally created. It has to be added. So in North Carolina, when your unmarried buyers are buying and they say they want to do joint Tennessee, get them to an attorney so the attorney can explain this to them. But the attorney's going to ask them, when something happens to you, do you want your ownership interest to go on to the other, to be divvied up between the other owners? Or do you want that to go on to your heir? We have a choice in North Carolina. What about if someone sells his part to someone? I'm getting to that. Yep, in just 1 second. So here's a picture of what right of survivorship looks like. You got two people that own joint tenancy 50-50. One passes away. The other one is the last man standing, 100%. They now own it in severalty, don't they? They own 100%. How many owners do you have? Now you just have one. This is right of survivorship. So if you have a sister and a brother purchase a beach cottage, they take title as joint tenants with the right of survivorship. The brother later dies. His interest automatically passes to his sister as the surviving joint tenant. She now owns the property in severalty. Why did it automatically pass to her? Because they added right of survivorship. Had they not added that, then whatever his will says will happen to his interest. Who's going to get that interest? Who's going to get that property? If it's not added, then it goes to their heirs. So it either goes on to the owner with right of survivorship, or it goes on to their heirs. I mentioned a very distinguishing feature of joint tenancy is those 4 unities. Joint tenancy has unity of possession. All owners have the right to possess the entire property. As a matter of fact, that's the case in all of them, tenancy by the entirety and tenancy in common. You can't, what we're divvying up here is the ownership interest, not the actual property. I have an ownership interest, thus I have a right to access the whole property. How many of you have siblings, grew up with siblings? And did you have to share a room with your sibling? See, I don't know this pain. I'm an only child, so I don't know. But apparently some of you with siblings and you guys shared a room and you would get in a fight. And somebody would take something and draw a line down the middle of the room and say, this is my part of the room. You don't come in my part and I won't come in yours. Anybody ever have that battle with their siblings? We can't do that with concurrent forms of ownership. You cannot draw a line down the middle of the property and say, this is my half, this is yours. Does that make sense? I have an ownership interest, so I have the right to access the property. Unity of possession. Unity of interest, again, joint tenancy is typically equal interest. So we have an equal interest, unity of interest, unity of time, and unity of title. All joint tenants are taking title at the same time. We're all there at the attorney. We're all sitting there. We're all signing all at the same time. We're all on the same deed. That's what we mean by the 4 unities of joint tenancy. So somebody asked a few minutes ago, what happens if somebody new comes in? So let's say, for example, you have 3 owners of joint tenancy. Let's pretend that that's equal. You have owner A, owner B, and owner C. And they all, 4 unities, they come in all at the same time. They all take title at the same time. They become joint tenants. Let's say, fast forward down the road, a couple years, whatever. And at some point, B says, I am sick of you two. I have had it. I'm going to sell my interest, convey my interest to owner D. Was D there back in the day when we became joint tenants? Was D there back in the day that we took this title, took this property together? No, D's the new guy, aren't they? So D can't be joint tenants with A and C. By B selling their interest, they kill that joint tenancy with A and C. A and C were there at the same time, weren't they? A and C were on the original title. A and D or A and C, excuse me, they're still joint tenants, but now they have a tenancy in common with D. D can't come in as a joint tenant. D's going to come in as a tenant in common. What happens when everybody starts dying? Call your attorney. Now it gets really interesting, doesn't it? Because the tenancy in common, we're dealing with heirs. Joint tenancy, maybe they have right of survivorship, maybe they don't. See why I want y'all to call an attorney? That just got really complicated really fast, didn't it? If you want to know more about this, sign up for law school. One thing at a time. Why don't you get your real estate license first, and then you can. I wouldn't try to take on real estate school and law school at the same time. But again, what we need to know is, unless you're the original, unless you're the unity of title and unity of time, the new guy can't come in as a joint tenant. Questions on this?
I have a question.
Yes.
Just the problem topic. Basically, what you're saying, that's the problem piece of it, is that on the test they may ask, does joint tenancy go from B to D? And the answer is no. That's just the big problem. Because I'm assuming call your attorney is not an answer.
That's right. That would be a good assumption. So you're right. The problem topic is what happens to B's interest when he sells to D, understanding that D can't come in as a joint tenant. Good question. Thank you. Okay. One more thing to say, and then we'll take a break. What's the purpose of D buying? Well, he's got 33%, 33 1/3% interest. So, you know, if you want ownership in this property, what if deed says goes to children? Joint tenancy is going to, excuse me, right of survivorship is going to override wills. Joint tenancy. So if the deed says it's going to go to the children, yeah, joint tenancy overrides a will. The last thing, just to finish up this section real quick, and then we'll take a break. How do we terminate tenants in common or joint tenancy? Well, the parties can agree to sell their shares. They can agree to sell the property, sell their interest. How much do they get? It depends on what their ownership is, 33 1/3 of the sales price, for example. Or the court can take the property. The court can almost always take the property. So if the court has to get involved, they may divide the land. They may require them to sell. Just depends on the mood of the judge that day, doesn't it? So how do we end tenancy in common or joint tenancy? Either they sell or the court takes the property or divides the property. So again, tenancy in common, joint tenancy are for unmarried people. When we come back from break, we're going to talk about the married people form of ownership. So let's take 10. Why would the court do that? It depends. Various reasons. Why do we go to court to begin with, right? Welcome back. Cameras are on. Look up and see if you see the light or not. So we are going to take attendance. Come on, why was I flashed? We do that sometimes. And I have already taken attendance. So if you're just now getting back, if I missed you, please tell me in a chat that you're back. Whenever you come back late, just tell me in a chat so I can give you credit for this hour. In private chat is fine. Okay. So we've talked about Tennessee in common. We've talked about joint Tennessee, unmarried people when they take title. Tennessee by the entirety is set aside for people that are married when they take title. Guys, this is so important. Please listen to me for a second before you start writing. The act of getting married does not create a Tennessee by the entirety. What creates a Tennessee by the entirety is you're married when you take title. So if you each own property and severalty, and then you get married, that's where that marital life estate kicks in. The act of getting married. So Tennessee by the entirety is for married couples. As I mentioned earlier, North Carolina is known as a spousal state. In North Carolina, if you're married, whether or not your spouse is on the deed or not, if you're married, it takes 1 to buy and 2 to sell. So if you're married, I don't care if your spouse is on the deed or not. If you're married, both of you have to sign that deed to convey, sign the deed to sell. 1 to buy, 2 to sell. The story I heard, I got my license in 2008. The story I heard in pre-licensing, and you guys, please let me know you're back. I see a lot more of you back than when I took attendance. So please let me know you're back so I can make sure I give you credit. The story I heard about North Carolina being a spousal state when I took pre-licensing in 2008, and it stuck with me, so I'm hoping it'll stick with you. Gentleman purchases a condo for his mistress. 1 to buy. That relationship ran its course. Gentleman goes to sell the condo. What does the attorney say? 2 to sell. You think he uttered some 4-letter words? So what's his choices? Well, he either has to fess up because he's got to get his wife to sign that deed to sell that condo. What'd you buy a condo for? I mean, maybe he's got to find a tenant. I don't know what his choices are. Is he stuck? You bet you. Why? Because North Carolina is a spousal state. 1 to buy, 2 to sell. Welcome back. I guess the moral of this story, rent an apartment for your mistress. Don't buy her a condo. With Tennessee by the entirety, right of survivorship is automatic. Or don't have one. Yeah, I guess so. That could be the other alternative. Just don't have a mistress to begin with. Right of survivorship is automatic with Tennessee by the entirety, which means you have 2 spouses. One passes away, their interest automatically goes to the remaining spouse. I don't care what this person's will says. I don't care because they have right of survivorship. When one dies, their interest automatically goes to theirs. Now, guys, the other thing I feel they need to say, once again, we're not in law school. So we're not going to, what about prenups? What about all that? Yes, of course, that all applies, but we're not going to go there in this class. You want to go down the road of prenups? Sign up for law school. Tennessee by the entirety has unity of possession, interest, time, and title. Both spouses are there. They're married when they take title. They're married when they both purchase the property. Tenancy by the entirety is terminated by death. 2 spouses, 1 passes away. Now the remaining spouse owns 100% in severalty. Divorce will terminate the tenancy by the entirety. What's going to happen to the property in the event of divorce? It just depends on the divorce decree. Or mutual agreements of the spouses. Both spouses can agree to sell the home, sell the property. So let's see, I got a couple questions. How do people know if married if nobody tells? So that's a question we may need to ask, right? My best friend has been married for 12 years. She never took her husband's name. So when you meet the 2 of them, they have 2 different last names. At first blush, you may not know that they're married, right? Sometimes we just got to ask some questions. See, if I'm married and I buy a property and then I sold it, what my husband need to do? You're the one that bought it. Now that you're married, your husband has to sign that deed to convey it as well. North Carolina is a spousal state. 1 to buy, 2 to sell, even if you only have 1 spouse on the title. So to your question, you buy the property, as long as you're married, you're the only spouse on the deed. Now that you're married, the husband's got to sign to convey it too. That's right, you're still married. Married is married, right? You're either married or you're not. If you're separated, you're married. If you're engaged, you're not. Married is married. So speaking of, while engaged, are you married when you're engaged? No, you're either married or you're not. So while engaged, Tom and Nancy purchased a home in Walkertown. They're both named as grantees on the deed. Obviously, they had to buy as joint tenants or tenants in common. 1 month later, they get married. Their marriage does not convert the ownership into a tenancy by the entirety because they were not married at the time that they took title. How do you create a tenancy by the entirety? You got to be married at the time you take title. I think this is important too, so please listen up. Tenancy by the entirety is the default for married people. Bless you. They could choose to take title as joint tenancy or tenancy by the entirety if they wish, are involved at this point, by the way. Tenancy by the entirety is the default for married couples, but it's not their only option. I had buyers a couple years ago. They were moving down from New York. They were not married. He came down for a job. She said, sure, I'll come with you. That sounds like fun. They're out together buying a house. I'm with them. I'm out showing them property. I knew they're not married. They told me this just through the series of conversations. We're not married. We found a property. They went under contract. I knew they couldn't be tenancy by the entirety because they're not married. Maybe they will one day. Maybe they won't. I don't know. But today they're not married. So I knew their options were tenancy in common or joint tenancy. Guys, I'm not an attorney. I cannot advise somebody how to take title. That's giving legal advice. So instead of whipping out my pre-licensing book and trying to explain the difference between the 2 of them, I arranged a conference call on her lunch break, 5 minutes with them and the attorney for the attorney to explain. And I wasn't privy to that phone call. I was not on that conference call, but I'm pretty sure it went down like this. The attorney looked at them and said, when one of you passes away, what do you want to have happen to your interest? Do you want it to go to the other owner or do you want it to go on to their heirs? And I'm guessing they said on to the other owner because they did joint tenancy with right of survivorship. Did everybody hear the whole story? What I want you to hear is I did not whip out my pre-licensing book and proceed to explain it to them. I cannot tell somebody how to take title. That's offering legal advice. So don't worry about writing this down. Hold tight. I have this slide and it's in the Unit 2 material and Learn Test Pass. And I think this slide does a nice side-by-side comparison of the 3 concurrent forms of ownership. And where I really think that this slide is going to be helpful for you guys is 2 months from now, when you're reviewing everything, get ready for your test. So this will be a good 2 months from now. This is going to be way in the rear view mirror. So this is in Learn, Test, Pass. You guys can grab this slide and Learn, Test, Pass, and it just does a nice side-by-side comparison. Do I have an attorney on my team? No, but I wish I did. Maybe they have, maybe your clients have an attorney, maybe they don't. Sometimes they may look at you and say, who do you recommend? So as you guys get in the business, you're going to learn attorneys and mortgage lenders and home inspectors, and you're going to be able to recommend. Questions on concurrent forms of ownership. They use their attorney. I told them to call their attorney. The one that calls is the one that gets to pay the bill, right? I ain't calling. If they say I don't have an attorney, I can help them find one, but I'm still not making that call. I can't afford that. Again, rest assured, you guys will meet. You'll meet people, you'll form relationships. The last little section of Unit 2 is on community property, also known as common interest property. You may hear this as a hybrid form of ownership. With this hybrid form of ownership, there's elements of both. You own property, and then you also have a concurrent form of ownership with the common areas. Those common areas are owned and or managed by an HOA, homeowners association. Why don't you guys tell me in a chat, when I say common area, what do you think of? What do you think of with common area? Everybody goes there first, especially in September. Pool, sidewalks, playground, parks, landscaping, gym, parking lot. What if there's a clubhouse? If there's a clubhouse, you might have a kitchen area, dog parks, elevator. These things are examples of common areas. They're common because we all share them. Everybody that lives there shares them. So a couple different forms of hybrid ownership, community ownership. First off, you have condominiums. Condominium owners or condo owners own air. They don't own land. They don't own air above. They own air space, I should say. Condo owners own from wall to wall, sheetrock to sheetrock, paint to paint. With condo ownership, the common areas are managed by the homeowners association. The common areas are owned by all of the owners as tenant in common. We got two forms of ownership here now, don't we? You own the condo, and then you own the common areas as a tenant in common. With condo ownership, you may have exclusive right to limited common areas. For example, they may have an assigned parking place. They may have an on-site storage building. In North Carolina, we have something called the North Carolina Condominium Act of 1986. This applies to new construction condominium, brand new units never before lived in. And there's a couple things that the developer has to do. And we're going to talk more about the developer in unit 5 or 6, maybe 6. So the developer has to finalize what's known as the plat map. The plat map lays out the land. This is a unit, this is a unit. It gives you a map of the land. They also have to have the final bylaws. Bylaws are like the rules that govern that community. And they have to have the plat map and the bylaws finalized before they can close on the first unit. They can go under contract with preliminary, but they got to have everything finalized and recorded before they can close on the first unit. Doesn't a buyer shouldn't he get to know what he's buying? And we got to have the rules, the bylaws, the plat map, everything finalized before they purchase. The developer also has to offer a public offering statement prior to going under contract. Again, new construction. So this public offering statement just lays out how it's structured, how's it managed, what's management, who is going to manage it. And the other thing that new construction condominiums have, the buyers have a 7-day recession period. If a buyer is rescinding their contract, they're taking it back. If they put down any deposits, they will get their money back. If you rescind a contract, you're taking it back, you get your deposit. Both parties go about their lives as if this never happened. This 7-day recession, again, only applies to new construction, the first owner of the unit. The second owner doesn't fall under, now they're resale. The third owner is resale, etc.
I have a question. Is there any reason to that as far as it only being the first owner that has that 7-day recession?
There's a myth out there on the street that some developers and builders are shady salesmen. So by allowing the buyer time to review the contract, they can't fall for those high pressure sales. Just sign here, just sign here, just sign here. So if they do get that high pressure sales, then they have 7 days to look at it, take it to their attorney if they want, think about it.
Okay. Cool, thank you.
Protecting the public. Yep. So you get a full refund. That's right. If you rescind the contract, you take it back. If you put down any deposits, you get your money back. The Condo Act does address just a couple quick things about resale. The purchaser still has to get the information, the resale certificate. What are the dues? What are the assessments? What are the other fees? But with a resale, there is no right to cancel. There is no right to rescind. Condo owners, they own airspace. They don't own land. They don't own the air above. They don't own the exterior of the building. They own what's inside only. Another hybrid form of ownership is a cooperative ownership. This is also known as a co-op, C-O-O-P, co-op. With a co-op, you don't own property. A co-op, you buy stock. And by purchasing stock in the company that owns the property, that gives you the right to live there. We're going to talk about special assessments. All of these hybrid forms of ownership, if you need a new roof, the HOA can put a special assessment on the owners. If you need to repave the parking lot, you know, any work to the common areas, they'll put a special assessment. So with co-op, again, you don't own property, you own stock. By purchasing the stock, that gives you, that's what a proprietary lease is. It's an occupancy agreement. And that occupancy agreement says you can live there as long as you own stock. Somebody just said in the chat, you are spot on. Where we see co-ops most often is think older, bigger cities. So New York City, Boston, Philadelphia. I've heard of one of these in Charlotte, but that's about all I know about it. We don't do these much around here, but they're possible. So co-op, you don't own property. You own stock. That stock gives you an occupancy agreement. It gives you the right to live there. Then we have townhomes, townhouses. Townhomes are sometimes referred to as row houses because they're side by side in a row. One distinguishing factor of them is they usually have a party wall. They share a wall. You guys see my picture here. This is going to be one unit over here. This is going to be somebody else owns it over here, and they share that party wall, that wall right there. Townhome owners own a little bit of land. Townhome owners own the air above their unit. The common areas are owned and managed by the HOA. Remember, in a condo, we said the homeowners own, but now in a townhome, they're owned and managed by an HOA. Again, what if we need new roofs? What if we need new siding? What if we need to repave the parking lot? It's going to be spelled out in the HOA bylaws. Are they collecting some of that from your HOA dues every month? Are they going to do a special assessment? It's spelled out in there how they're going to do that when they need to do exterior repairs. Townhomes are not covered by the North Carolina Condominium Act because they're not condos. They're townhomes, two different things. So the hybrid ownership is the unit, and then you have access to, in this case, you don't own anything here, right? But you have access to, owning that unit gives you access to those common areas, owned and managed by the HOA. For the tests, will they refer to townhomes as row houses? Possibly. Another hybrid form of ownership are timeshares. This takes us back to people having reputations as being pushy, shady salespeople. Timeshares don't have a great reputation, do they? So the North Carolina Real Estate Commission has come in and said, we got to have some regulation. Remember, their whole purpose is to protect the public. And that includes when the public is purchasing a timeshare. So big picture of a timeshare. You own the unit, for example, 1 week out of the year. You own that unit with 52 other people. And when you buy that unit, you know what your week is. And that's when you have the right to occupy that unit. We see these a lot down at the coast. A timeshare then is the right to occupy at least 5 or more separate time periods over at least 5 or more years. I need you guys to see the words at least. At least is the minimum. If you own it for 10 or more separate time periods over 10 years, you have a timeshare. If you own it for 3 or more separate time periods over 3 years, you don't have a timeshare. Everybody see what I'm saying? The minimum requirement to qualify under a timeshare, you own a unit, the right to occupy at least 5 or more separate time periods over at least 5 years. If the building, if the development or the community falls under this definition, then it's considered a timeshare. So in other words, if you name it Julie's Resort, but it's at least 5 or more separate time periods over at least 5 years, it's still considered a timeshare. If you call it Downtown Hotel and it meets this definition, it falls under the category of timeshare. Everybody with me? It doesn't matter what the name of the building is. If it falls under this definition, it's considered a timeshare. Buyers for any timeshare, new construction or resale, have a 5-day recession period. Again, these are the guys that have the reputation. Is it true or not? I don't know. I've never met one. But these are the guys that have the reputation of being pushy salesmen. So to protect the public, if they feel pressured to sign this contract, they have a 5-day recession period. They rescind their contract. They put down any deposits. They get their money back. The developer of the timeshare has to have an escrow account, also known as a trust account. We will talk about trust accounts, escrow accounts later in this class. Please bear with me. And any deposits made when we go under contract has to stay in the developer's escrow account for 10 days. If the buyer rescinds within 5 days, they get that deposit back. If they don't rescind on day 10, the developer can move that money from their trust account to their operating account. But they have to keep it in their trust account for 10 days. Why the extra 5? I don't know. I think sometimes because the developer does have the right to make sure that that check has cleared the bank, right? So if the buyer buys today and gives you a check and then they cancel tomorrow, the developer has the right to make sure that that has cleared the bank before they release it. We don't want to put the developer in that situation. All right, I'm going to stop sharing just for 1 second. We'll come back, but I want you guys to see each other. You guys got all this written down? I got a little trick to help you guys remember what we need to know about timeshare. So push back. Can you guys see your peers? Say, hey, everybody. So push back and give yourself some room. Let me get my coffee out of the way before I hurl it at my laptop. So one trick that we have that can help us remember timeshares. If we can remember 5, 5, 5, 10 jazz hands. I don't know. The jazz hands aren't really part of the definition, but they can help us remember. So let's do that together. Y'all ready? What do we need to know about timeshares? 5, 5, 5, 10 jazz hands. That's the fun part about it. You can't see. Oh no. You missed the show. So what's the focus? What do we need to know about timeshares? 5, 5, 5, 10. Just throw the jazz hands in to have some fun. You will not be tested on jazz hands. The other thing that we need to know about timeshares. Remember we introduced you guys last week to the North Carolina Real Estate Commission? We're going to talk more about them. You're going to learn all about them as we go. The North Carolina Real Estate Commission is a licensing governing body. What I'm saying is that they regulate your real estate license. The North Carolina Real Estate Commission giveth you your license, and guess what? The North Carolina Real Estate Commission can taketh it away. They can suspend it. The one thing that they cannot do for most brokers is fine them. You're not going to get fined by the Real Estate Commission. Now, could your injured buyer or seller take you to court and the court sue you, the court fine you? Yeah, absolutely. You can sue anybody for anything. So if they find that you're guilty and you've injured the party, they can make you pay. But that fine doesn't come from the Real Estate Commission. That comes from the courts. There is only one time that the Real Estate Commission can fine a broker, and that is a timeshare developer. And they have the authority to fine a timeshare developer up to $500 per violation. This is it. This is the only time the Real Estate Commission will get involved in matters of money. They don't regulate your commission split. They don't fine you. They don't charge you. They don't sue you. They regulate your license. The exception being the timeshare developer, and they have the power to fine you up to $500 per violation. Questions on our co-op, our hybrid forms of ownership. One last thing in Unit 2, talking about trusts. A trust is just, it's a way to avoid probate. If you put your estate in a trust, then you're basically having an attorney handle it. We don't have to go through probate. Sometimes probate gets lengthy and costly. Probate, pretty much the dissecting of the will. So some people may choose to put their estates and their interests in a trust. That person putting their interest in the trust would be the grantor. The beneficiary is the one that will receive it at some point in the future. They're going to benefit from the trust. And the person managing it is the trustee. That individual is usually an attorney. It's just another way of estate planning. If we are ever called to list a property that is in a trust, if we're ever called to list a property that's in a trust, we're probably going to be dealing mostly with the trustee, with the attorney, because they're handling the affairs on behalf of the grantor. Question comes in, if someone has a will, is a trust needed? Yeah, that's a call your attorney kind of question. I do not know. I do know that some, like I said, sometimes probate, sometimes dissecting that will. Have y'all, unfortunately, families, sometimes it gets ugly, doesn't it? So some may choose to put it in a trust and be done with it. Call your attorney. All right, big deep breath. Whoo, we just made it through Unit 2. You know what I heard a lot of in Unit 2? Call your attorney. Again, I'm giving you guys just enough to be dangerous, aren't I? You have all this information. You think you know what you're doing. Know when to stay in your lane. Unless you're an attorney, you cannot offer legal advice. And guys, here's the thing. The reason we got to talk about this stuff in class is because the consumer, the public doesn't know what I can and can't do. They're going to ask me these questions. And if I don't know how to respond, we're stuck, aren't we? It's not their job to know what I can and can't do. That's my job. And when they ask, what do I do with this joint tenancy? We need to know how to advise them. So in Unit 2, we got key terms on page 20. I'm really a big fan of the key point reviews. Yeah, me too. I'm a big fan of the key point reviews. It's like your Cliff's Notes. Anybody get through high school on Cliff's Notes? Here you go. And then the student quiz. And remember, we're going to start treating these student quizzes like a timed test. Figure 2 minutes per question. Look up the answers in the back. If you get something wrong, obviously you want to make sure you understand what the right answer is. But guys, if you get it wrong, spend some time thinking about why you answered the way you did. Did something get crossed up here? Did something get mixed up? So uncross that. There you go. Yeah, we got lots of CYAs in this class, don't we? I'm going to have you calling your attorney. I'm going to have you calling your accountant. And I'm going to have you covering your assets. Y'all thought I was going to say a bad word, didn't you? Not while I'm recording. Again, you do the Unit 2 quiz, set your timer. A lot of times what I hear from you guys, especially once you get going and you get in your groove, a lot of times what I hear from you guys is, oh, I knew that, I just read it too fast. What should that tell you? Slow down. How much can you slow down? Set a timer. Start today working with a clock. Fair enough? All right. Before we jump into Unit 3, I need to stop sharing my screen just for 1 second, so bear with me. And before we jump into Unit 3, I want to just kind of introduce you to a math tool. I said the M word. Maybe I do cuss in class. So let me pull this up. We don't actually get into math until, I lost you guys. There you are. We don't actually get into math until the end of Unit 3. We probably won't get there today, so we know we'll have that to look forward to on Thursday. But I do like to just do a little soft introduction to math, kind of introduce you to just kind of the ideas and the concepts that we can expect to see in this class. And I'm going to introduce you to my favorite tool to help get you start thinking about that. So first off, did everybody go calculator shopping this weekend? Look at all your calculators, pretty nice calculators. If you haven't been yet, please go ahead and get the calculator you want, or calculators you want to use for your exam. Because you guys, every calculator has its own little quirk. And I need you guys to figure the quirk out before test day. Fair enough? Would it surprise you if back in the day we were in person, I would have people showing up asking me how to use their calculator? Why would you do that to yourself? Why would you stress yourself out like that? So get it now. The other thing I want you guys to get a calculator for, this calculator is not near as smart as the calculator on your phone. You're used to the calculator on your phone. And you know what? This one's really, really smart. This one is not. So I need you guys to start getting used to a, shall I call it a non-smart calculator. So if you haven't been calculator shopping yet, please do so. A couple of you reached out to me this weekend with a picture and said, will this work? And I appreciate that. I would almost rather you do that now than show up on test day and me say, yeah, sorry, you can't use that calculator. Everybody good? Does everybody hear what I'm saying? I almost always have somebody show up on test day. So let's squash this on day 2. So my suggestion, remember that we're recording. And my suggestion is you guys just kind of put your pencil down, relax for a minute. This is not testable math, but we're just introducing you to some topics. So question is, does it have to be a 10 key? Yeah, I can't have you anything that stores formulas. If you store formulas, it could be considered cheating. You cannot use a graphing calculator. Basic 10 key. Everybody see what I got? I got 10 keys. I got 1 through 9 and 0. That's what we mean by a 10 key. The good news is in this class, I only use, well, we use add, subtract, multiply, divide, and percent. So we use 5 keys. You couldn't find one? I got mine at Walgreens, Amazon, Walmart, Target. You're just looking for a 10 key calculator. Again, if you're not sure, just reach out to me before you hit Dollar Tree. Yeah, just reach out to me before you purchase it. Is that fair? Let me say yay or nay before you spend your money. Okay. All right, so Best Buy, yep. So in this math, we use percent a lot in this class. And when we say percent, all we're saying is per 100. Percent just means per 100. So if I say to you something like, 5% of the homes on the street are yellow, all I'm saying is that out of every 100 homes, 5 of them are yellow. That's what we're saying. Percent is just saying per 100. One thing you guys tell me when you tell me you hate math and you chuck your pencil down and say, oh, I can't do this. One thing I hear is that you don't know how to read the word problems. And I get it. We don't read math, do we? We do math. So when you're reading a word problem, you got to take that information and you got to somehow put it in a math problem. And I think that's where a lot of the confusion goes. So I'm going to offer you lots of practice, tips and tricks to help you work through that. But one thing I know, when you see the word of in a word problem, the problem is telling you to multiply. So if you do these practices, if you work through this math, you're going to start seeing, oh, that means I got to multiply something. Maybe you don't know yet what to multiply, but at least you know you got to multiply something. So the word of, so for example, 350,000 times 25% is the same thing as saying 25% of 350,000. I'm saying the same thing. Why don't you guys tell me in a private chat, whip out your brand new calculator. Let's see how this works. Tell me in a private chat, what is 25% of 350,000? And while you're doing that, the reason I ask, anytime we do math together, I will always ask for you to tell me your answer in a private chat. And the reason being, there's two reasons I ask for a private chat. One, I fear sometimes that you guys are so afraid of getting it wrong that you won't even try. So by doing it in a private chat, this is just me and you. You and I are the only ones that are going to know if you got it right or wrong. And I got all 48 of your answers coming up in my chat right now. So honestly, I'm having a hard time keeping up who got right, what wrong. So I want you guys to feel comfortable to give it a shot, give it a try. The second reason I asked for math answers in a private chat, because I know some of you, and some of you will sit there and wait and see what everybody else says and says, oh yeah, that's my answer too. And that's not how you learn. So I want you guys to pick the calculator up and try yourself. Fair enough? So every time we do math together in class, it's going to have a private chat. So I like most of what I saw. 350,000 on your not so smart calculator. You take 350,000 times, and then you can do 25%, or you can do 0.25. 25% is the same thing as 0.25. Pick one way and stick with it. If you like the percent key, use the percent key. If you don't like the percent key, then use the rate of 0.25. Don't try to toggle back and forth. So pick a way and stick to it. So here's our first math problem. I'm going to give you guys just a couple minutes. We're not going to spend too long on this. I'll give you about 2 minutes. First thing you're going to want to do is just read the problem. Before you pick your calculator up, just read the problem. Then you go back through, pick your calculator up, and tell me in a private chat, what is the answer? You got an extra 0 in there. I hear you. All right, so let's see what we got here. Problem says Lane sells her home for $250,000 and pays her real estate agent's firm a commission of 5% of the sales price. What is the total commission paid? Did you guys see the word, the magic word in math? The commission is 5%. 5% of what? The sales price. What's that word of tell me to do? Multiply. So you take your calculator, 250,000 times 5%. We get a Oh. Thank you, Abby. I didn't see that come through. Yeah, so you just pull up your chat. And you should be able to select 2. And 2 is either everyone or just me. So 5% of the sales price. So what's the commission paid to the firm? $12,500. How much of that $12,500 are you going to get? The answer is, it depends on your firm's policy. Every firm is different. Every compensation split is different. We're going to talk about your commission and compensation splits in Unit 8. So we will get there. Questions so far? See, this wasn't too bad yet. All right, let's go ahead and take our break. We come back, I'm going to introduce you to my math tool.
Hey, Julie,
Yes.
is that about the extent of math on the test? Are they just calculating commission? Okay. I'm
No.
just checking.
we're just warming you up.
Good deal.
Yep. And I'm recording. So if you want to go back through it, you can, just make a note. We started that conversation about 10:45. So you can go back through and watch that again. Yep.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
When you're recording these, is there a way that we can go back for like before our test exam and use it to study, or is it just for your
No, ma'am. Hang on, I want you guys to access this. So here is the link to our YouTube channel.
Oh, perfect.
There you go.
Thank you so
Easy
much.
enough. Absolutely. All right. Do we come back? Usually I say you math and y'all just shut down on me. So do I have already made math fans in the class? Come on, I cannot be the only math nerd. Am I? Thank you. All right. It's like confession time. All right. So let me take attendance. And been talking about this math tool. I'm going to give you guys just a few minutes to write this down, and then we're going to talk about it. So please take just a minute and jot it down. We'll talk about what all this means.
Quick question.
Yeah.
So, well, we can go back on YouTube and rewatch this and be able to take the notes down again, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
That's why
So
we
do
get
you
paid.
post every, after each class?
So I add to our YouTube channel. Did you get our YouTube
Okay.
channel this morning when we first started?
Yeah.
Okay. So I add to it.
Okay.
What you're looking at on your screen is known as something called the T-bar. I love the T-bar. I think if we can get the T-bar, you guys can get about 80% of this math, give or take. There is some math that you got to memorize the formulas. If you don't know the formula, if we can't use the T-bar, you have to know the formula. And if you don't know the formula, then you don't know what to do. So any of this math, the T-bar math, the formula math, I always suggest putting that on your index card so you can ask yourself, your flashcard, so you can ask yourself over and over and over and over again. Knowing the formula is half the battle, over half the battle. But a good chunk of this math, we're going to use something called the T-bar. The T-bar looks at 3 variables. It looks at something called the part, the whole, and the rate. This back forth line right here, let's just call it our east-west line. You guys see this line right here? That line right there means divide. The up-down line, or the north-south line, means multiply. When you're dealing with the T-bar, I know 2 of the variables, and I'm solving for the 3rd one. So one of the variables is my X that I'm solving for, and the other 2 are known from information in the problem. When you're setting up your T-bar, anytime you see rate or percent in a math problem, more often than not, we can use a T-bar. The rate or percent always, did you guys just hear my absolute word there? The rate or percent always goes in the bottom right. Part goes on top, whole goes on the bottom left. I'll talk more about those in just a second. What I like about the T-bar so much, the T-bar actually gives me 3 formulas. I can solve for the part. I would take the whole times the percent. I can solve for the whole by taking the part divided by the percent. Or I can solve for the percent by taking the part and dividing it by the whole. It depends on what my X is. What am I solving for? I'm either solving for the part, the whole, or the percent. The majority of the time, when you're talking about part versus whole, the majority of the time, the part is the smaller number. The part, the number on top, is part of something. It's a piece of something. The whole being the entire thing. We do have a math example later on, well down the road in Unit 12. We'll be old proficient at the T-bar by the time we get there, where we're going to see the part is bigger. That's the exception. Typically, what we look at is the part's the smaller number, the whole And then the rate or percent always goes on the bottom right. So now taking our newfound information here, let's go back to the problem that we just did. We already know the answer. So let's go back to the problem that we just did. Lane sells her home for $250,000 and pays her real estate agent's firm a commission of 5% of the sales price. What is the total commission paid? Well, I've read the problem and I see rate or percent. So I know I can go ahead and throw down my T-bar. And Julie said the rate or percent always goes where? It always goes where? In the bottom right. This should be the one you don't have to think about. Where does the rate or percent go? It goes in the bottom right. Now I'm left with two variables, the part and the whole. In this problem, one of them is the sales price. The other one is the commission. Which number, unfortunately, is smaller? Commission or sales price? Unfortunately, it's our commission, isn't it? So what number is going to go on top? What are we solving for? Our X is on top. My whole is the sales price. Up, down line means what? Multiply. So you take your 250,000 times 5%. And what we have done is, without memorizing formulas, we have solved for the part for the commission. The rate or percent is the easy number. The hard is trying to figure out what number goes on top, what number goes on bottom. I offer math tutoring, and hands down in math tutoring, the number one question I get, hands down, the number one question I get is, when do I divide and when do I multiply? And my highly educated response to you, because you have precious test time ticking away, you're staring at a blank piece of paper, waiting on numbers to like magically appear, which they don't do, by the way. So when do you divide? When do you multiply? My highly educated response to you is, do it both ways and see what you get. So we did this. We're not sure. Is that right? I don't know. Let's try it again with switching those. Julie says the rate or percent always goes where? It always goes in the bottom right. But now we're in the heat of the test and we can't remember if sales price goes on top, does sales price go on bottom? Oh, what do I do? Switch those two numbers. This took all of 3 seconds and my time isn't ticking away. Now the back fourth line means divide. So if I take 250,000 divided by 5%, I get a commission, heck yeah, of $5 million. Does that make sense? Sadly, no. You would sell one house and retire, wouldn't you? Does it make sense that you're going to get paid more than what the seller is going to sell the house for? So, oh, when do I divide? When do I multiply? Oh, I don't know. Guys, just take 3 seconds and flip those two numbers. And most of the time, you can easily see that one doesn't make sense. So I think as you guys are using the T-bar, you're going to put the numbers, the part and the whole, you're going to switch those. And I hope if you get an answer of $5 million commission when you're selling the house for 250, I hope your brain says, as nice as that sounds, I hope your brain says that just isn't right. Wouldn't that be nice? Sell one house and then $5 million and you're done. Retire. It doesn't work that way. Why do you have to use the T-bar? You do not. You can do math any way you want to. This is one thing I know about math. Our brains see it differently. So however your brain sees it is how you're going to do it. I'm going to try to offer several different ways to see it in class. I'm a big fan of the T-bar because I think it helps take the formulas out of it. I think that's what scares us a lot. So I do heavy T-bar, but guys, bottom line, I don't care how you get to the right answer. Both of your exams are multiple choice. All you have to do is show me A, B, C, or D. I don't need to see your work. I don't need to know how you got there. I just need to see A, B, C, or D. So if your brain sees it differently, by all means, please do it that way. Just get the right answer. We're actually going to start math at the end of unit 3. Like I said, we probably won't get there today, but we'll start that. And we're going to start using the T-bar in practice. Again, we're just getting warmed up. The other thing I want to share with you guys, now that we know the T-bar, when you're doing these quizzes at the end of each unit in your book, you need to be able to grade yourself. So you know, did you pass this unit? Remember my exam, you have to have a 75% pass. So you do the quiz at the end of unit 1 and you say, well, did I pass or not? Well, guess what? You can use the T-bar to help you. Total number of questions. I can't talk and type at the same time. You can use the T-bar, your percent, to help you know if you pass the end of unit quiz or not. You just take the number you got right, divided by the total number of questions. So if we look at the unit 12 or unit 2 quiz, for example, unit 2 quiz has 25 questions. Let's say you took this and you got 19 right. My question to you is, what is your score? You got 19 out of 25, but what does that mean? So back fourth line means divide. So you take 19 divided by 25 and you get a score of 0.76, which shakes out to, move the decimal over 2 places. You made a 76% unit 2. Did you pass? Did you make at least a 75%? Yes. If that was less than 75%, I suggest going back through unit 2, fine tuning those things. You guys have got to be gauging yourself as you go. By the time we show up for test day, you've gone through the units, you've gone through Learn, Test, Pass, you know about where you are, you know where your weaknesses are. Guys, as long as you're working through this with me in class, there really should be no surprises on test day. So set your timer, grade yourself so you know where you are. Don't be shocked on test day because you fail. Well, I never graded myself. Well, then how do you know how you were doing? Grade yourself, gauge yourself as you go. Okay, did I hear a question? Do I need to hear any questions? What questions do I have? Again, the official math starts on whenever we meet next. I guess that's Thursday. Okay. All right, fun with math. So let me stop sharing just 1 second. Zoom's quirky sometimes on different devices, and for some reason I can't have more than one PowerPoint up. Zoom doesn't like that on my device. So now I got to go back and grab our other PowerPoint. And where we're heading is back in the book, and we're getting into unit 3. So if you guys want to go ahead and be finding page 51. Yeah. Come back and get you guys. Unit 3. Unit 3 is all about encumbrances. That's a new word for us, isn't it? We're going to define encumbrances in just a second. But everything, there's one thing in unit 3 that's not an encumbrance, but everything else in unit 3 is an encumbrance. So we're going to talk about things that encumber real property. So in this unit, we are going to talk about the different types of encumbrances. Of course, we will define an encumbrance. We're going to talk about property taxation, talk about property taxes. By the way, property taxes is the math that we get to do. Again, we probably won't get that today. If we do, it'll just be a little introduction. So Thursday, we'll start with this. Okay. So unit 3, page 51, the first thing we need to do is define what an encumbrance is. Y'all please don't get it in your heads that encumbrances are good or bad. Encumbrances, maybe they're good, maybe they're bad, it just depends. An encumbrance is just anything that affects the title to real estate. An encumbrance is some kind of limitation. It limits what we can do with our property, even if we own it, fee simple, absolute. Encumbrances are almost always appurtenant. Y'all remember that big fancy word? What's appurtenant mean? If it's appurtenant, I love you guys. It runs with the land. So if it's appurtenant, it runs with the land. It goes with the property. People buy houses every single day with an encumbrance, something that affects the title. Let me ask you guys a question by show of hands. How many of you like electricity? How many of you like water? How many of you like your internet connection? Those are all a type of encumbrance. Did you buy the house with your water and electricity, or did you have to dig and install it and put it in yourself? Not unless you're going new construction, you build with it. Encumbrances are just something that affects the title. So we're going to talk about everything but one. And this unit is a type of encumbrance. And the first type of encumbrance we have is something called a lien. When you see the word lien, I would actually like you to see the word, if I can spell it, loan. If you have a lien on your property, you owe somebody some money. Somebody has filed a lien as an attempt to get paid. It's a non-possessory charge, meaning the lien holder doesn't have the right to live there. They just put a charge against the property as a way to try to collect the debt. What do you owe them? The lien holder has the right to record the lien in an attempt to collect when you sell your property. We're going to talk about recording and lien priority and all that good stuff. Where are my homeowners on the call? Where are my homeowners? When you bought your house, did you buy it with a mortgage or cash? You don't have to answer out loud, just answer yourself. Were you a cash buyer or did you get a mortgage? Did you borrow money from the bank? If when you bought, you borrowed money from the bank, the very first thing they did with your brand new home is put a new lien on you. The bank has got to protect their interest. They want to make sure that you pay them back. We have two different types of liens. The first type of lien is a specific lien. It's specific lien because it's specific to the property. A specific lien is specific to the property. This is a lien for 123 Main Street. With specific liens, that is the only one that can, excuse me, let me rephrase it, only affects the property. It doesn't affect the people. Examples of specific liens. Deed of trust. In North Carolina, we're very fancy. We call our deed of trust your mortgage. In North Carolina, the mortgage is referred to as the deed of trust. We're going to talk about mortgages and deed of trust when we get to Unit 14. So we'll see this again. The mortgage is what the lender gives the borrower as security in the event of the borrower's default. Another specific lien are real property taxes. Every home in the state, every property in the state of North Carolina is subject to taxation. Did y'all know that? Every single property in the state of North Carolina is subject to taxation. Taxes attach and are due to the property each year. Failure to pay your taxes means you have a delinquent lien on your property. We'll talk more about that when we get to the end of this unit. Another specific lien is government special assessments. So let's back up for just a second. What is a special assessment? A special assessment is a charge that the government may put on the property to improve the property or the surrounding area. For example, the government may put a special assessment on if they want to install sidewalks or street lighting. Maybe they decide that they want to hook an entire neighborhood up to public sewer or public water. They're improving the property. Special assessments are charges to the homeowners. Particularly with specific liens, we're talking about government special assessments. Now, when we get to Unit 6, we're going to talk about HOA special assessments. We talked about that earlier with the condo, like if you're going to put on a new roof or repave the parking lot. So what we're referring to here is government special assessments. Yeah, Nicolette?
I was wondering, can you hear me? I was wondering when a special assessment is like being spoken about, like is that in like a city council meeting or HOA thing to where people can agree?
Absolutely. Yep. So the government, the city or the county officials come together and vote to install sidewalks. They send you a letter and say you owe us a special assessment. Maybe they open that vote up to the public, maybe they don't. But yep, it's going to come from your local officials. Good question. Thank you. A mechanics lien is a specific lien. Hang on to that. We're going to talk more about that in just 1 second. So hang on to mechanics lien for just a minute. And then there's also, it's a low priority lien called a North Carolina commercial real estate broker. And what this lien does is it allows the commercial real estate agent, not residential, but the commercial real estate agent to put a lien on the commercial property as an attempt to protect their commission. Again, it's low priority, meaning this guy's getting paid last. He's at the very end of the line. Real property taxes and government special assessments, we're going to learn in just a minute, together are also referred to as superior liens. Real property taxes and government special assessments are superior liens, meaning they will always get paid first. The government made the rules. The government's going to make sure they get paid first. Quite frankly, I can't blame the government. If Julie made the rules, do you know who I would make sure got paid first? Julie, all day long. So real property taxes are always paid first, special government assessments second, if any. And then most other liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded. So lien priority has to do with the date that they are recorded down at the county courthouse in the county where the property is located. We'll talk more about recording in just a second. Specific liens, they attach to the property. So let's say you buy a house. You're buying a house today. Does the seller have a mortgage on it? Do they have a deed of trust? Most of us do, right? Unless you're lucky enough to be a cash buyer, good for you. But most of us have money, owe money to the bank when we sell the house. What I'm telling you guys is, if the closing attorney that's handling this real estate closing, they are handling this real estate transaction, if they don't make sure that the seller pays the deed of trust before they convey the property to the buyer, the deed of trust will run with the land. So if the seller doesn't pay it off, the new owner gets stuck with it. See, another good reason why we want attorneys to be involved in the closing process. We're going to talk about the attorneys in Unit 5, what their role is. The attorney represents the buyer. Isn't it in the buyer's best interest for the attorney to make sure all of these specific liens are paid before they convey? Because it attaches to the property. Everybody hear me? It's not going to go when the seller goes. If it's not paid, it's gonna stay with the property. So we're gonna talk about, that's kind of a foreshadow to Unit 5, just bear with me. I know it's a lot of information. Building up. Deed of trust in North Carolina, we just call a mortgage. Specific liens, meaning they attach to the property, not the person. So let's talk about what this mechanics lien is. And guys, please remember I'm recording and you have all of my PowerPoints in Learn, Test, Pass. So let's talk about what the mechanics lien is. The purpose of a mechanics lien is to give security to those that provide labor or supplies in the improvement of real property. Why don't you guys tell your peers in a chat to everyone, what are some examples of some mechanics? Who is somebody that would provide labor or supplies to the improvement of the real property? Who is that person? What do they do? Landscaper, yes. Contractor, HVAC, plumber, painter, all of it. Plumber, drywall, general contractor, architect, surveyor, inspector, electrician. We haven't seen that one yet. Maybe an appraiser. We're going to talk about the appraiser. Yeah, the roofing company. These are all people that provide labor or furnish materials. You order work done at your house. You hire an electrician or a plumber or a landscaper. You hire somebody to come on your property and provide labor and material. And then you don't pay them. Shame on you. But guess what? That mechanic has the right to file a lien on your property in the hopes to get paid when you sell, when you convey. Mechanics lien law says commercial or residential projects where the cost is $30,000 or more has to have a designated lien agent. You have, think of like a general contractor that oversees the entire operation. And that general contractor will subcontract plumbers, electricians, painters, drywall guy, flooring guy, whoever you need to do this project that's more than $30,000. So in other words, what we're saying is if you have this project more than 30,000, you have somebody overseeing the project. If you're spending $30,000 on a project, it's a good size and lots of subcontractors are involved, right? You just don't have painters showing up to paint a room. If you're paying $30,000 to have somebody paint a room, please call me. I have recommendations for you. I'm just saying. It's a big project. Maybe you're adding a room to the back of the house. Maybe you're finishing the unfinished basement, making a little in-laws quarters down there. Yeah, Ashton?
Sorry. So if you, I know sometimes like when you're selling your home, you can apply the inspection or the appraisal to like the sale and they don't get paid until you actually close. Would that technically be considered a mechanic lien?
I guess possibly if they don't get paid. Yeah, so if you buy a house and you don't pay the home inspector, possibly they could. I don't know that it's an improvement. That's where I'm kind of unsure because that's kind of a fine line. The home inspector is just inspecting. They're not necessarily making an improvement, but they are providing labor. So
Gotcha. Thank you.
yeah. So let's talk about some laws of the mechanic lien law. There are certain rules that mechanics have to follow in order to have the right to collect. North Carolina says that a mechanic has to file the lien. They have to go down to the courthouse and file the lien within 120 days from when they last finished the job. Whenever the job ended is when their 120-day clock starts. So let's think about it. You hire somebody to come on, maybe it's a general contractor with $30,000 of work, maybe it's just a landscaper with $200. Either way, don't they have the right to get paid? Don't they deserve to get paid? They came in and they provided labor, right? Supplies. So you have this work done. They come in and they plant some new rose bushes. They do your landscaping or whatever. and they send you a bill and you ignore it, and they send you another bill and you ignore it. They send you a final bill and you say, whatever, what can they possibly do to me? On day 119 from when they ended, they could file a lien. You may or may not know it, but what that does is protect them. It gives them a place in line. So when you go sell your property, when you sell your home, generally there's a line of people standing there with their hand out waiting to collect. And by filing the lien within 120 days, the mechanic has the right to stand in that line and hopefully collect what you owe them. Failure to file within 120 days means that the mechanic has lost their right to stand in line and collect. So they have to file within 120 days of the work ending, whatever the last day of the job is. If the mechanic is going to bring action to enforce, that's just a fancy way of saying foreclose. If they're going to bring action to enforce, they have to do so within 180 days from when the work ended. We'll look at examples in just a second. Now, guys, let's be honest. Most landscapers aren't in the foreclosing business, are they? I'm not telling you they're going to foreclose on you or attempt to go through that process. What I'm telling you is they can, as long as they choose to do it within 180 days from when the work ended. So we got 120 days to file the lien. We got 180 days to bring action to enforce. Remember a few minutes ago, we were talking about lien priority. We said your superior liens are always paid first. Taxes, government special assessments, always. There's another absolute word for you. Superior liens are always paid first. After that, most liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded. It's a race to the courthouse, right? The first one to get their lien recorded is who gets to stand in what order tells us we get to stand in line to collect. The exception to that is the mechanic's lien. The mechanic's lien is not paid in the order in which it's recorded. The mechanic's lien is retroactive and goes back to the date that the work began. Question comes in, could an HOA file a mechanic's lien if HOA dues were unpaid? It wouldn't be a mechanic's lien, but they could, whatever their bylaws and regulations say, possibly. And if it's allowed in the bylaws, then they could possibly file a lien. So you got your superior liens, always paid first, taxes and government special assessments. And then all other liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded. There's our race to the courthouse, except for the mechanic's lien. The mechanic's lien is paid in the order in which the work began. Day one of the job, it's retroactive. They have 120 days from when the work ended. Is the project going to take a day? Is it going to take 2 months? Depends on the project, doesn't it? So y'all put your pencils down for a second. You guys, you make my hand hurt, I promise. Put your pencils down for a second. Let's just take it in. So let's look at some examples together. On August 8th, your hot water heater goes out. You call the mechanic, your hot water heater guy comes over, he repairs it on August 8th. You say, oh, thank you so much. I'm so appreciative of you. You're not that appreciative though, because you don't pay him. He sends you a bill, sends you a final notice, you never pay him. He has 120 days, which is roughly until December 8th to file the lien. So 120 days from August takes us into December. He has 180 days to take action to enforce. So this hot water heater guy could file the lien as long as he does it by December 8th. He could bring action to enforce as long as he does it by February 8th. The work started and began on August 8th. Do I have everybody so far? Okay. Well, August is a really bad month for you. 2 days later, your dang AC goes out. You call the guy today. He says, all right, I'll be out on the 16th to fix it. You say, oh, thank you so much. August is a terrible time to lose my AC. I'm very appreciative of you, but you don't pay him. He has 120 days from when the work ended to file the lien. So that takes us up to December 16th. He has 180 days from when the work ended to bring foreclosure. The work began on the 10th. It ended on the 16th. You don't pay either one of these guys. Shame on you, by the way. You don't pay any of these guys. You now have hot water and AC. Pay him. So you don't pay either one of these guys. The hot water guy files his lien on December 1st. The AC guy files his lien on November 20th. Do your head one way or the other. Are both mechanics within their 120 days? Did they file their lien within 120 days? Yeah, do I need to go back? Yeah. So they had until the 8th and the 16th, they filed it within. So they're in their rights to file. Are they in their rights to file? Yeah, they've done everything right so far. I would like you guys to tell me in a private chat, so you don't give the answer away to everybody. Tell me in a private chat, who is going to get paid first, water or AC? Who is going to get paid first? The water guy or the AC guy? So in this case, who's going to get paid first? It's the hot water guy. Why? Because mechanic's lien is the only lien not paid in the order in which it's recorded. It's paid in the order in which the work began. Let me go back for 1 second. Who started first? The AC guy started and ended on the 8th. Yes? I'm sorry, the water guy started on the 8th. The AC guy didn't start till the 10th. So even though the AC guy filed first, the mechanic's lien is the only lien not paid in the order in which it was recorded. It's paid in the order in which the work began. A mechanic's lien is a specific lien. Let's talk this through for a second. You get a call to list a house. You're licensed, obviously, you've made it past this, and you're licensed, and you get a call to list a house. Yay! So you go out to your listing appointment. The seller asks you, is there any work that I can do that would maybe add to curb appeal, maybe add to my sale, make it a more sellable property? So you look around and you say, well, you know, the front porch could use a nice new coat of paint and maybe some landscaping. And gosh, if you could clean these carpets, that would be really helpful. Are those all improvements to the property? You got a painter, you got a landscaper, and you got a cleaner. Are those adding improvements to the property? Sure. So your seller says, oh, that sounds great. Thank you so much. I appreciate your advice. I'm going to go ahead and do that before you list it. Say, great. They have the painter and the landscaper and the cleaner come out. Seller never pays. Buyer comes in, makes an offer. We go to closing. On day 119, the mechanic files the lien. Does it follow the seller? Do your head. Does it follow the seller? No. It's a specific lien. So it attaches to what? It attaches to the property. Is your buyer, is your new homeowner a happy person? No. They're paying for something that they didn't even do. They're stuck with a lien that they didn't do. So how can we avoid? Don't get up in arms on me. Hang on. How can we avoid this? Well, as listing agents, first off, if we notice recent renovations, can you smell fresh paint? If you notice renovations and fresh paint, can't you ask some questions? Wow, that's a nice new coat of paint you have there. Is everybody paid for? I would word that a little bit differently than I just did. But can't we ask questions? Furthermore, one of the forms that the seller has to sign at closing is an affidavit saying that this won't happen. They will sign something saying, I promise everybody's been paid, and they won't be able to file a lien after the fact. Somebody said, what about the title search? It's not going to show up on the title search because the mechanic hasn't filed the lien yet. Remember, they have 120 days. So if 119, day 119 is after closing, they file the lien. Does the mechanic care who owns the property? No, they just want to file the lien and put it on the property. Obviously, if it's on the title search, yes, it'll show up. But what if it's not? We're going to talk about the title search. We'll talk more about this when we get to Unit 5. This is why we have something called title insurance. This is why the attorney has the seller sign something saying, it's an affidavit saying, I promise this will not happen. So if it does, title insurance is going to be there to protect the new owner. We'll get into, I call Unit 5 the attorney's unit, because I guess I should say another attorney's unit. So we'll get into more of that process. Any questions about the lien, mechanics lien or specific lien? When you guys start working with buyers and sellers, you're going to have to ask some awkward questions. You're going to have to get out of your way, put yourself out there. I mean, you just met these guys and you're already saying, but have you paid your bills? But we got to ask questions sometimes to get down to the bottom of it. If you guys are shy, trust me, you won't be long in real estate before we break you. If you have thin skin, trust me, you won't be long in real estate before we toughen that skin up a bit. Trust me. You think sellers like hearing that? Yes, I paid. How dare you ask me that? But what about the 1 out of 20 that says no? Do I have to? You guys with me? We got to ask the hard questions. We'll talk more about that. So if a specific lien attaches to the property, so we need or can, you could wait. I could also ask to see paid in full invoices after it's done, right? So if they say, I'm going to fix this after you list, can I say, that's great, but I need to see a paid in full invoice when it's complete? Yep, absolutely. So specific liens attached to the property, general liens attached to the person. They go where the person goes, and they will remain with the person until they get paid off. This is applying for any type of loan, not just a mortgage loan, but a car loan, a personal loan. They will follow the person until they're paid off. Judgments are issued by the court. The judge could put a judgment on you that requires you to pay. Personal property taxes, if you own personal property taxes and you fail to pay your personal property taxes, they could put a lien on you. We talk about personal property referring to all the toys, the car, the boat, the RV, the ski jets, the motorcycle. State tax liens, failure to pay your state income taxes or your state inheritance tax. Did y'all know you got to pay a tax to inherit money? Of course you do. State inheritance tax, failure to pay that lien could create a general lien on the person. And then federal tax liens, failure to pay your IRS taxes. All liens, you got superior liens. After that, all liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for the mechanic's lien that's paid in the order in which the work began. So you have all these lien holders out there. And what they're doing by recording is putting themselves in line. People are standing in line waiting on you to sell so you can get paid. They can get paid. That's all lien priority is. Who gets paid in what order? Questions? Just real quick, we mentioned very briefly, this is all we need. We mentioned a homestead back in unit 2. That's what my page numbers are referring you to. The homestead can be an exception to a general lien. Now we got the judge involved. Again, I just don't want you guys get bogged down on a homestead. We're just kind of mentioning it, moving it on. They have to wait for you to sell, not unless you are willing to pay them ahead of time, right? You can pay off your mortgage before you sell, right? So you can pay liens off. But if you don't, they're standing in line with their hand out. Yep. So could you pay off your delinquent? Of course you can. But the latest that they're going to collect from you is when you sell that property. They're going to take that out of the purchase price before you get paid. You get what's left. And that, let's think about that. The seller sells the house for the sales price. Does the seller get the full sales price? Absolutely not. The seller gets what left after everybody else has been paid off. As we mentioned earlier, lien priority is actually for you. Page 55, our superior liens are our taxes and government special assessments. All other liens are paid in the order in which they're recorded, except for the mechanics lien that's paid in the order in which the work began. Liens are an encumbrance. I'm not saying they're good or bad. The majority of us need a mortgage to buy a house, right? You need to borrow money from the bank to buy a house. Is that good or bad? Well, do you want to buy the house? Doesn't the lender have the right to file the lien to protect their interest? Not unless they think they're going to give you free money. Y'all, there ain't no such thing as free money. They got to protect their interest somehow. How do they do it? File a lien. Questions on liens? Maybe they're a problem, maybe they're not. I don't know. I don't know a single property that doesn't have some kind of encumbrance on it. Another type of encumbrance, moving away from liens, another type of encumbrance are restrictive covenants. If you're purchasing a property that's in a homeowners association, you're in an HOA, the restrictive covenants are an encumbrance. We're going to talk more about restrictive covenants in Unit 6. We'll talk a lot more about them there. What we need to understand about them right now is that they're an encumbrance. We may have mentioned the other day, restrictive covenants are appurtenant, which means what? They run with the land. The first owner abides by the restrictive covenant, the fifth one, the 250th one. We'll talk more about covenants. The whole point of covenants, some are more restrictive than others. The whole point of covenants, though, is the developer's attempt to try to preserve value. Some of you, for example, may not want to live next door to the guy that has 10 cars on cinder blocks in the front yard. So how can you prevent that? I don't know all the covenants out there. I don't know what they all say, but I'm sure somewhere there's a covenant that says you can't do that. If you don't want to live next door to that guy, you may want to consider getting in an HOA with covenants. If you don't care, take your chances. Just because that guy doesn't live there today doesn't mean he can't move in tomorrow, does it? So if you want to prevent that in the future, get in a covenant again, or an HOA. We'll talk more about this in Unit 6. We'll come back to covenants. Okay. All right. Last break for today. So let's take 10. We come back. We keep going in Unit 3.
Hi, Julie.
Hey,
Hi, I forgot to turn my camera back on after the last break. I just wanted to make sure that you
I
got
saw
my
that in the
chat.
chat. Yep, I saw that.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
Uh-huh. Oh, I didn't hit start. There you go.
I
You
was
guys
just
got a
about to
few
tell
extra
you
seconds.
that.
Thank you.
No
It's a
problem.
long break, huh?
Right. Thanks for the extra little minute there.
Hey, you know. back. Less than an hour. How's everybody doing? We're kind of getting a feel for the class. I can't stress this enough, you guys. We point forward. We do not have a rear view mirror. If you feel that you're not grasping something the first time you hear it, I'd say that's pretty normal. The more you expose yourself to it, the better chance you're going to have to get it. So if this is the first time you're hearing the word encumbrance, you might feel a little lost. So how do you better understand an encumbrance? You go back and watch the video. You go back into the unit in the textbook. You go back into Learn, Test, Pass. Everybody with me? You got to keep going back and revisiting this stuff outside of class, because we got a lot to cover in a short amount of time. So in this class, we just point forward. I know hands down, the biggest benefit for me to go on Zoom is the ability to record. I think that's the best tool I have to offer you guys. Some previous students have told me that they, bless your hearts, you sit and listen to me at work, listen to me when you're driving down the road, right? As the more ways that you can hear it and see it and expose yourself to it, things are going to start clicking. This week and next week are still considered pretty easy. It's not for the following week. And of course, we'll talk more about what to expect as we get there, but we're just easing you guys in, just easing you in. Okay, everybody good? I once had an instructor say, consider this. It's like you're getting a master's degree in real estate in about 2 months. There it is. All right. So cameras are on and I can see you. So I'm going to take attendance. And we continue on in Unit 3, which is all about encumbrances, just something that affects the property. And another encumbrance, remember we had a French lesson earlier today? So now we're going to get a Latin lesson. Another encumbrance is something called a lis pendens. Lis pendens is Latin for litigation pending. Think of a lis pendens as a legal stop. The court is in process of going through this legal battle, litigation pending. And depending on the end of the legal battle, maybe the homeowner gets to keep the property, maybe they don't. It's a warning. Don't you buy this house until we know the outcome of this legal battle. A lis pendens is a stop, a legal stop. Letting you know that there's a pending lawsuit, a pending litigation. Thank you. Yep. Thank you guys for telling me you're just getting back. Another legal stop or a legal warning is known as a writ of attachment. Again, legal stop. Don't you buy this property. In this case, the court has ordered to seize the property. The judge, for whatever reason, has taken the property. It's in process of happening. Don't you buy this house because it's not going to be the seller's to sell. Both are legal stops. One's in process. The other one is pending. Writ of attachment. Another encumbrance, something else that affects the property, and the one that we are probably the most familiar with, back to my question about if you like water and electricity and all that. How does your water and your electricity and your internet have the right to be there? It's through something called an easement. An easement is it's a permission for somebody else to use your land. It's not a grant of ownership. Duke Power Company does not own anything on your property. However, because of an easement created by the courts, Duke Power Company has the right to run electricity to your home. Maybe they have the right to have a pole on your property. That's an easement. We all have easements, don't we? If you don't, I really want to talk to you. Man, you're on on-site septic, you're a well water. I don't know where you're getting your electricity. I'd like to know that. There are two types of easements. The first type of easement is referred to as an appurtenant easement. What does the word appurtenant mean? It runs with the land. So an appurtenant easement does what? It's an easement that runs with the land. Appurtenant easements affect two and only two tracts of land. Did everybody hear what I just said? It affects two and only two tracts of land. Two tracts of land side by side. It's appurtenant to both parcels. It's appurtenant to both tracts. The two easement holders are known as the servient tenement and the dominant tenement. The tract of land that's being used is known as the servient. The tract of land doing the using is known as the dominant. Where these start or how these come to be most of the time, and y'all please excuse me, I'm not an artist, but how these come to be most of the time, let's say you have a tract of land, here's your road, and somebody named owner A owns this tract of land. And one day owner A decides they're going to subdivide their land. They're going to take their land, they're going to divide it in two, and then they're going to sell it to owner B. B has to use A to access the road, don't they? There's no other road. There's no other way to get to it. The only way for B to get to the road is to access A. A would be the servient. They're being used. B is the dominant. They're doing the using. B's got to get to the road. There's a similar picture in your book on page 56. I don't know why B just can't tear those trees down and build a driveway. Maybe they're environmentalists. Maybe those trees are protected. I don't know why. But what we know from looking at this picture is that in order for B to access the road, they have to go over A's lot. Everybody see that? That's an appurtenant easement. How many tracts of land? Show me. How many tracts of land? Two and only two. Tract A, tract B, the servient and the dominant. Welcome back. Appurtenant easements need to be recorded. Running back down to the courthouse again. PowerPoint will go. There we go. Appurtenant easements need to be recorded. It's got to be enforceable against anybody purchasing either tracts of those lands. Again, they're appurtenant, protecting the interest by recording it at the courthouse. We're going to talk all about recording and the importance of recording. That's our unit 5, our attorney's unit. We'll probably get into that on Thursday. Start on that at least. Another, I guess, type of appurtenant easement, not necessarily recorded, but another example of an appurtenant easement is a party wall. We talked earlier about townhomes. You could also have an appurtenant easement with a shared driveway. So both of you have right to access that driveway. This picture, man, they got everything going on here, don't they? They got a shared driveway and then their garages are a party wall. You guys see that? They share a wall. I think this is kind of common downtown areas, tend to see this, shared driveways, that kind of thing. If this tree falls down on the garage, who's responsible for it? Well, they both will be, right? Because it's affecting both of their garages, both of their properties. So party walls, sometimes referred to as cross easements. Yeah, you never know with a party wall which who your neighbor is, do you? How do they live? What's their lifestyle? Apartment, condo, townhome living, you know what I speak of. So pertinent easement, again, cross easement, party wall. The other type of easement is an easement in gross. An easement in gross could affect one piece of property. It could affect thousands of pieces of property. It's in gross. An easement in gross benefits the person using. It doesn't benefit the property. It benefits the person or the entity that's using the property. A personal easement in gross, well, actually, neither one of these run with the land. Neither one of these are appurtenant. An example of personal easement in gross, let's say I own property and the back of my lot, there's a really nice pond. And you want permission to come fish on my pond whenever you want, day or night. You don't feel like you should have to call me and say, can I come fish on your pond? You just want permission to come fish on my pond. If I agree, I could grant you a personal easement in gross. I could give you information, I could give you permission to come on my property and fish on my pond whenever you want to. When I sell my house, that personal easement dies. So you only get to come fish on my pond as long as I'm the owner. When I sell, it's not appurtenant. So when I sell and you come back on somebody else's land to fish on their pond, that's called trespassing, unless you get permission from the new owners. A commercial easement in gross is generally used by an entity. This is where Duke Power Company comes into play, or R&R Railroad. You may have power poles or railroad tracks along your property. They have permission to be there through a commercial easement in gross. Court ordered. It's not appurtenant. It doesn't automatically run with the land. So let's say Duke Power Company goes up for sale. Duke Power Company announces we're going to sell. When the new owner comes, and the new owner automatically, whoever the new power company is, doesn't automatically have permission. They don't automatically have this commercial easement in gross. It's not appurtenant. Now, the truth is the new power company is going to have really good attorneys, and they're going to make that a condition of the sale, right? So they can keep coming on and accessing those power poles and power lines and everything. But what we need to understand is it's not automatic. It doesn't just happen because it's not appurtenant. It transfers from one owner to the next to the next. There's a good picture of an easement in gross on page 57. Lot A is highly affected by those power poles, isn't it? Lot B is only a little bit affected. You guys ever been driving down the road and you run parallel to train tracks and you see all those houses that it touches along the way? They have a commercial easement in gross. Yes, ma'am, Kiki.
For the easement in gross, is that something a person normally or a company normally pays for to have that?
I mean, they're gonna have to pay the court fees and stuff, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, this all goes through the court. As far as paying you, the homeowner, no.
Okay, even with the personal easement?
Personal easement, if you tell your friend every time you come on my land to fish, you're going to pay me $5. That's an agreement between you two.
Okay.
Right. If your friend says that's stupid, somebody else down the road has a pond too, I'm just going to go fish on, so that's an agreement between you two.
Gotcha. Thank you.
With an easement in gross, there is no dominant easements. There's nobody doing the using. The only you doing the using is the owner who is being used. The entity is doing the using. And again, when the easement owner dies, when Duke Power Company shuts their doors, that's a bad day, y'all. We got better things to worry about than power poles. But if Duke Power Company shut their doors, it doesn't automatically pass to the next power company. Again, they got good attorneys. They're going to make sure that it happens.
Julie?
It's not automatic. Yeah.
I have a question.
Mhm.
So with an easement and gross, say you have a property and a railroad goes through it, okay? And it's a tree property. Let's say there's a big storm and a tree falls and it goes over the railroad tracks. Are you responsible for removing that, or is the railroad responsible?
May I answer your question with a question?
Yes.
Whose property is it?
Well, it's my property,
go.
but they
There you
have the
go.
easement.
Whose property is it?
Okay,
So who's responsible for cleaning the tree?
okay.
Yep. Good question. Thank you.
Mhm.
Jordan, kinda. I will get to that in just a second. Just bear with me. Thank you. There are 3 different types of easements. Or now let me rephrase that. We've already talked about the 2, pertinent gross and easement and gross. Sorry. There are 3 different ways that easements are created. They just don't happen out of thin air. So 3 different ways that easements are created. Anytime you have an express agreement is one that is clearly stated. Maybe it's oral, maybe it's in writing. The key factor to an express agreement is that all the terms have been clearly stated. So we can create an easement through an express agreement. The party wall, for example. An implied action is one that's not been clearly stated, but is demonstrated by actions. We're going to talk more about express and implied when we start talking about agency and contracts, all that good stuff. An easement by necessity is an implied easement. And what an easement by necessity says, a homeowner can't be landlocked. If you're landlocked, you are denied access to or from your property. Remember the little picture I just drew a few minutes ago? Where you got the tract of land, owner A, subdivided, and now we have owner A and owner B. If A says, don't you cross my land, don't do it, they have landlocked B. They've denied them access to or from their property, and you can't do that. You can't landlock somebody. So in that case, an easement by necessity would be created. It's implied that people should have the right to come and go. The other way an easement can be created is by operation of law. Again, if the judge, if the law steps in. And our example of that is something called an easement by prescription. Remember, if you have an easement, you have permission to be there. You don't own anything, but you have permission to be there. So an easement by prescription, let's say you've been using a portion of somebody's land for the last 20 years. And all of a sudden, your neighbor wakes up and says, you know what? I no longer like your fence, a section of your fence being on my property. I know it's been there for the last 20 years, but I don't like it. Well, unless we create an easement, we're now kind of in a deadlock, right? The 2 parties got to figure some out. But let's say a portion of your fence has been there for 20 years, 22 years. Now it's 22. And the owner says, I don't like your fence being there. Get it off my property. You go to the judge, you request an easement by prescription, and the judge may say, you know what, that fence has been there for 22 years. It's not been a problem until now. I'm going to give you permission to continue. Easement by prescription. You've been using it. They tell you to stop. Again, 20 years is and after 20 years, You take this to a judge and you say, I've been using a portion of this land or all of the land. Nobody's tried to stop me yet. The judge may grant an easement by prescription. If y'all think that blows your mind, wait until we get to Unit 5. And we're going to introduce you to something in Unit 5 that takes us a step further. Remember, an easement is just given permission to be there. In Unit 5, we're going to learn about a court order that could grant you that piece of the property. They could actually give you the piece of that property. So we'll take this a step further. Operational law, easement by permission, the judge, or easement by prescription, the judge gives you permission to be there. You've been doing long enough anyway. Might as well continue. Let's see, I have a question. Apologize, I'm just now seeing it. New owner cannot terminate easement in gross. The easement in gross is created by the easement holder. So for example, Duke Power Company, they own that easement. People that own the property can sell and come and go, right? But it's still Duke that owns that easement in gross. So you can't move it, buy a house and move in and demand Duke remove their power poles. You knew that easement was there when you bought it knowing and accepting that easement. Easements can also end. Easements can also end. Different ways that we can terminate an easement, a cessation of purpose. If the purpose of which the easement was created no longer exists, we no longer have a need to have an easement. Let's say you own land and you have a whole bunch of trees and woods and timber on your land. And some big lumber company approaches you via their attorney and they want to create an easement so they can come on your land and timber your wood. They can harvest and timber your land. Once they timber all those trees, once all those trees are gone, then the tree company no longer has a reason to be there, right? Once they get everything, that was the easement, that was the purpose. They took it all. Did they pay you for it? If you have a good attorney, they did. And once there are no more trees, that cessation, that purpose has ceased to exist. They have no reason to be there now. Merger of the parcels, once again, tract of land, owner A, owner B. B has to have an easement to get to the road. What happens if A wakes up one day and says, you know what? I'm going to buy B. They have merged the parcels together. Do we need an easement now that it's just one owner? No, we merged, we combined. So that would terminate the easement. Release of the right. If the easement holder is releasing that right, again, we got to go to the courthouse. We're going to file something called a quitclaim deed that we'll learn about in Unit 5. Get to talk about different types of deeds. And then if you abandon, if you're no longer using the property, that could also terminate the easement. So how easements end, a couple different ways. Questions on easements? Yeah, Nicolette.
So an easement doesn't always have to be like a written contract. It could just be like an implied thing.
It could be implied. Absolutely. It could be implied. So we wouldn't have to have anything in writing for an easement by necessity. So, you know, yeah, express, the terms are clearly stated, implied. We just start acting like we have an easement. So if I let someone use some of my land and record it in deed, the new owner cannot terminate. If I let someone use some of my land and you recorded that, wow, I don't know. That's a CYA kind of question right there. I do not know the answer to that. I do not know how that would be. So let's get our attorneys again. Okay. We said most everything in this unit is an encumbrance, right? The only thing we're going to talk about in this unit that's not an encumbrance is something called a license. And a license is just privilege to enter somebody else's land for a specific purpose. What's the difference in a personal easement in gross and a license? A personal easement in gross is an encumbrance. A license is not. That's about all we need to know on that. So again, back to the come on my land to fish on my pond. I'm either going to give you a license. It's not an encumbrance. In other words, it's not going to encumber my property. It's not going to affect my property. Or I'm going to create a personal easement in gross. Which one are we going to decide? That's between me and you. License is not an encumbrance. Everything else in this unit is. Another type of encumbrance is called an encroachment. These are bad. These are always bad. We said maybe encumbrances are good, maybe they're bad. This one is always bad. As a matter of fact, it's so bad. When you see the word encroachment, y'all see the word roach in there? Ooh, it is bad. If you have an encroachment, your part of your property, your improvement extends onto your neighbor's property. Some of your improvement extends onto your neighbor's property. Why don't you guys tell us all in a chat what you think the number one encroachment is? Number one encroachment. What I'm seeing the most of, and I would agree with you completely, is the fence. Trees, maybe they're an encroachment. Maybe part of your trees expanding onto somebody else's. Absolutely, that's an encroachment. The problem with the trees is when it falls down. Right now, who's responsible for it? I can't answer that. We got to get insurance companies involved. If it turns ugly, we got to get attorneys, right? Trees are a different class. But probably the biggest encroachment that we see, the most common one that we see, is a fence. I so wish before, can we call them fence builders, fence installers? You guys with me? The people that put the fence up? I wish that they were required to make the homeowner order a survey before they installed the fence. But they don't. Fence company shows up, homeowner says, I want a fence to go here, here, and here. They do as they're instructed, they do their job, they put the fence in. The problem is when the homeowner doesn't have a survey to identify their property lines before they put the fence up. We're going to talk about surveys in Unit 4. We will see that on Thursday. The only way to identify an encroachment is to have a survey done, have a licensed surveyor come out and identify the property lines. I need you guys, I can't tell you how many times I've been out with buyers showing property and we're in a backyard somewhere. And I suggest, I start the conversation about getting a survey done. And they say, Julie, I don't need a survey. Do you see that fence right there? That's what's going to tell me where my property line is. The only thing you know by looking at a fence is that somebody put a fence there. Do you know if it's an encroachment? Do you know if it's on the property line? You have no idea. Oh wow, somebody put a fence there. The only way for buyers to identify encroachments is to have a survey done. We will talk about surveys. We will talk about the buyer's process of buying. If there's an encroachment identified and we don't take care of it prior to settlement, prior to closing, it could affect negatively both tracts of land. And as far as I know, there's only 1 or 2 ways to handle an encroachment. either make the owner take down that portion, get your fence off my land, or you create an easement. You give that fence permission to be there. Which one are you going to do? I don't know. That's an agreement between the parties. So if you buy a property, you get the risk that you have an encroachments. How do we know before you buy? Because you get a survey. It's the only way to identify an encroachment. We'll talk about surveys. Is buying a home a risk? Let's just go ahead and throw this out there. Is there risk involved with buying a $300, $400, $8,000 home? Yeah, you betcha. So when we talk about the buyer's process of buying, we're going to talk about some things that they can do to eliminate, not alleviate, but eliminate some of that risk. And the one thing they can do to identify encroachments is to order a survey as part of their process. And we will talk about that. So here's a picture. I like pictures. This red line is the property line. This is like some kind of building or garage or something. Look at that. That's a huge encroachment. Is there a garage coming over into your land? Yeah, that's an encroachment. Encroachments are bad because they negatively affect both tracts of land. Questions on encroachments? Other examples, we talked about the fence, this building here, maybe the shed, for example. Again, you guys, don't rely on the property or the fence to tell you where the property line is. Y'all want to hear an interesting story real quick? My husband's coworker, his neighbor put a fence up last year. He put the fence up and then he ordered the survey. Lo and behold, once he ordered the survey, they discovered that the fence was on the neighbor's lot. You don't know what this man did? He went and knocked on my husband coworker's front door and said, yeah, my fence is on your property. You need to pay to have that removed. I don't know if they ever got that resolved. Remember what we said on day one. If parties can't agree to agree, then an attorney or a judge will decide for them. I don't know whatever happened to that. I guess the moral of that story is have the survey done and then spend the money putting the fence in. Yes, ma'am. Is it D. Ashley? I want to make sure I say that right.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Hey.
So with this image, is an encroachment on their property. So would they be able to, they can sell that property to them, right? So they could keep that if they wanted to. Like the property that the garage is on?
This property?
Yeah, so would the people that own that land and property in the red, since that garage is on their property and say they want to keep it that way, could they offer to buy that part of land?
They could. We could redraw the line, couldn't we? So maybe that's an agreement we could work out to redraw that line and you buy this little section.
Okay.
Maybe we create an easement. Again, maybe this homeowner just comes in, a homeowner comes in and says, you need to remove this section, right? So now we're down to how are the parties going to handle it?
Gotcha.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. There's a couple more CYAs there in there. Are we calling our attorney? Oh yeah. If we can't agree to agree, the courts will decide for us. Yes, ma'am, Nicolette.
Sorry, just one more question. So you mentioned CYA quite a few times throughout. Does your brokerage usually have like an assigned attorney that kind of everybody?
Nope.
You have to have literally your own.
You form relationships. So once you do a couple closings, once you do a few transactions, you have a couple attorneys that you like working with. If you don't have those relationships yet, then your firm may have a preferred vendor list, people that they've had good experience with. So that may be a good place to start. Every firm I've ever known does not come with their own attorney. So we go out and form our own relationships. We network and, socialize and rely on our peers to help us know their good experiences so we can help start building those relationships. Okay. On page 59, we start talking a little bit more about property taxation. We're building up to the math. So let's focus on property taxes. Every property in the state of North Carolina is subject to taxation. Taxes are due every year, once a year. Property taxes help support government functions. Various functions and activities of our government, like them or not, it is what it is. And in North Carolina, we do something called ad valorem value. Ad valorem value bases the property taxes based on the market value of the property. Ad valorem is of market value. And in North Carolina, our tax rate is expressed as the tax rate per 100. So for example, you might see a problem that tells you the tax rate is 0.14 per 100. That's what we're saying, tax rate per 100. North Carolina does ad valorem taxes, something per 100. North Carolina also has something called the Machinery Act. Please understand, taxes, tax rates, assessed values, all that we're getting ready to talk about is regulated by the local government, city, county, municipality. It's all regulated by the local government. And for the most part, the local government is allowed to set their taxes. They're allowed to set their tax rates however they want to. The Machinery Act comes in and sets standards. Let's say it puts a ceiling on the government. You can charge a tax rate up to X amount. You can have an assessed value. They set standards. So the government just can't run out there and go nuts. They do have regulations for taxation. And those regulations are the Machinery Act. Somebody says, so no matter if you own your property or not, you're still paying the property. Oh yeah, man. Local count. Well, yeah. Government's got to get their piece too. Come on. You're a homeowner. Congratulations. Government's going, sweet. Give me my cut. So the Machinery Act. I've mentioned something about the assessed value. This conversation is about finding the assessed value for purposes of taxes. We're going to talk about market value for purposes of originating a loan. That's the appraiser's job. That's our unit, our unit 17 is our appraiser's unit. So the assessed value, it's the process. How does the government determine what the value of your property is for taxes? They have to have an assessed value. In North Carolina, our assessed value is 100% of market value for taxes. Again, this is not about the appraisal. This is not about originating a loan. This is for taxes. Other states, their assessed value may be less than market value. This is what I have to say to you. When you see a math problem on this, when you see a test question, it's not going to give you both in North Carolina and outside of North Carolina. When you get a math problem on this, it's either going to tell you to use 100% of market value, or it's going to tell you to use an amount less than market value, one or the other. And what I need you guys to do is always do what the problem tells you. If the problem tells you to use an assessed amount less than market value, please don't stand there and argue with the problem. But I'm in North Carolina, we do 100%. Just do what the problem tells you. Everybody good with that? Everybody hearing me? Just do what the problem tells you. Y'all love to argue with the test. Blows my mind. Y'all argue with the test question. So just do what the problem tells you. North Carolina, our assessed value is 100% of market value. In other states, they may use an assessed value less than market value. We'll see examples of both of these when we do our math on Thursday. So we said North Carolina uses a tax rate, a number per 100. Yes, a number per 100. Other states may use something called a mill. A mill is expressed as 1/1000th. Ad valorem is per 100. Mill is 1/1000th. So that's something like we need to do a nice side-by-side comparison, maybe on your flashcard. Ad valorem is per 100. A mill is 1/1000. So if the problem tells you that the tax rate is 15 mills, you just take 15 divided by 1,000. Again, the problem's not going to give you both. It's not going to give you per 100 and 1/1000. So you're going to do whatever the problem tells you. If it gives you the mill, you work with the mill. If it gives you the ad valorem, you work with that. So here's our nice side-by-side comparison. North Carolina, we use a tax rate per 100. So just do what we did, what did I say, 0.14 per 100. In this case, when I'm saying per, it's a fancy word for divide. Sometimes in a math problem, per is a fancy word for divide. So if I take 0.14 and divide it by 100, I have a rate, I want to live there, of 0.0014. So we're either dividing by 100 or we're dividing by 1,000 if it's a mill. North Carolina uses 100% of the assessed value. Other states use the mill. Their assessed value may be less. I can use the T-bar when we do tax math on Thursday. Good for you. You saw rate or percent. You said T-bar. Good. I like that. All right, let's fast forward. Hold your place in the book, but let's just look ahead together real quick. Let's go to page 61. I'm sorry, 64. 64. Don't write down what's on your screen. What's on your screen you're looking at on page 64. Everybody see that? So we have a taxation timetable. And for our purposes, we're going to pretend that this taxation timetable is for the year 2022, this year. On January 1st, each year, a tax lien is filed on the property. Happy New Year. You owe taxes for this year. You don't know how much yet. It's not due, but you know you owe taxes. I'm going to skip January 5th for a minute. I'll come back to January 5th. January 31st is when we have to identify our taxable property. My homeowners know about in February of each year, you get a letter saying, this is what we have as your taxable property. Have you added to it? Is there anything with it? Is there anything else we need to collect money on? The new tax rate is set every year at July 1st. They can adjust the tax rate each year. They mail the bill in August, and taxes are due and payable on September 1st. That's an important date about taxes. Taxes are due and payable on September 1st of every year. Can you pay your tax bill before September 1st? No, you don't even know how much you owe until August, right? And they're saying, don't you send us money. We're not going to collect until September 1st. So you have from September 1st until January 5th of next year. That's what that January 5th date is. You have from September 1st, January 5th of next year. Failure to pay taxes by January 5th each year will have a delinquent lien placed on your property. These are real property taxes. So show me on your hand, when do real property, what's the lien priority for real property taxes? When are they going to get paid? Number one, aren't they? Real property taxes and government special assessments. So September 1st, the bill doesn't come out. So let's say, what's today? Well, that's not a good example. Let's pretend you're buying a house. I don't know, pick a date. Let's pretend you're buying a house on May 15th. You go to closing on May 15th. You can't pay this year's taxes. The homeowner can't pay this year's taxes yet, right? We don't know. We don't know how much the tax bill is. When we go to closing, the buyer and the seller are going to share the expense of this year's taxes. The seller only owned the property until May 15th. The buyer owned the property after May 15th. Is it fair for either party to pay the full year's taxes? Is that fair? Put yourself in the buyer's shoes. If you buy a house on May 15th, are you going to be happy about paying taxes the first part of the year when somebody else owned it? Absolutely not. So how are we going to make that fair? We're going to do what's known as prorate the taxes. We're going to do a shared expense. We get into proration in Unit 21. So we're going to just start today in Unit 3 with calculating taxes. And then when we get to Unit 21, we're going to expand on that and talk about how we can share that expense between the buyer and the seller, just to make it fair. If we go to closing on May 15th and we don't know what the tax bill for 2022 is going to be yet, the only thing we have to go on is last year's taxes. What was the tax bill in 2021? Could it go up for 2022? Of course it would, could. But we don't know yet what that is. Our only other option is to say nobody can buy a house until after September 1st. Real estate agents don't like that, do we? You don't want to go 8 months out of the year without working. So again, Unit 3, we're just focusing on taxes. When we get into 21, we're going to build on that. We're going to expand on that just a little bit and figure out how we can share that expense between buyer and seller. You have a little example of what I was just talking about on page 61. You guys see the bottom there, 1, 2, 3, page 61. Just kind of look that over, but don't get too bogged down in that for now. We'll come back and pick that back up in Unit 21. Baby steps. So let's not worry about prorating just yet. So if the rate goes up for the following year, how is the difference paid? The new homeowner will be responsible for it. If it does go up for the following year, it shouldn't be that huge of an increase. So again, you go to closing on May 15th, you guys share 2021 taxes, you get the bill in September and it's more. That's another risk of buying a home, isn't it? The only way I can secure that for you is if you don't buy until after September 1st. That's the only thing we can do there. But most of the time, it's not that big of a difference that people are going to get too excited about it. So in North Carolina, we do what's called an octennial appraisal. Octennial means 8. And in North Carolina, we reassess the tax value every 8 years. Remember, the tax rate can change. The value is reassessed every 8 years. And again, the process is totally different to determine taxes than it is to determine market value that we will talk about in Unit 17. We're just focusing on taxes right now. So the assessed value can change every 8 years. The tax rate adjusts each year. North Carolina and cities and counties within also have the option of doing a horizontal adjustment every 4 years. A horizontal adjustment is just a one and done across the board. Everybody in this county is going to have a tax and assessed increase of 5% or 3% or whatever they decide. They're not coming in and assessing. They're just doing a horizontal tax assessment adjustment. So they reassess it every 8 years. We're doing a horizontal adjustment, possibly every 4. As we've been saying, appraisals and tax assessments, both are often done by appraisers. What we're going to talk about in Unit 17 is the appraiser getting an opinion of value to originate a new loan. What we're talking about in this unit is the assessment for tax purposes. There's a common misconception out there that the tax assessed value reflects what the home is worth. And that is a huge misconception. How the process that they do to determine taxes is totally different. In this market, we talked about the other day that we're in a very strong seller's market, very strong seller's market. Homes are selling for much more than the tax value. Those tax values are going to catch up. Don't y'all think the government's not sitting there watching what's going on with the market, watching these values go up, watching this happening? What do you think they're thinking? Cha-ching, 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 aren't they? They're seeing money in their pocket. We get back into a buyer's market. You may have the tax assessment, the tax assessed is less than the market value. Again, my point to you is they're in no way related. Two different things, two different categories. It's apples and bowling balls, you guys. Two totally different things. The other thing that we briefly mentioned were our government special assessments. Again, just as a reminder of our superior liens. Government special assessments are levied by local taxing authorities for the purpose of making public improvements to the property. Putting in sidewalks, putting in street lighting, storm drains, redoing storm drains, hooking an entire community up to public water or public sewer. These are government special assessments. Show me on your hand, what's their lien priority? When do they get paid? Government special assessments, they get paid right after taxes, right? Taxes are 1, government special assessments are 2. Everything after that is paid in the order in which it's recorded, except for the mechanics lien. It's paid in the order in which the work began. Questions? Okay. Well, the very next slide starts math, and I'm not about to do that with a minute and a half left in class. So you guys get to go a little early today. Before you go though, hang on, don't go anywhere. When we come back together on Thursday, we're going to start with the math in Unit 3. So please, I ask you guys to look ahead starting on page 63, those math concepts. Once we do the math in Unit 3, then we'll jump into Unit 4. We'll get through that pretty quickly. We'll get going in Unit 5. So we keep going, you guys. So please try to look ahead. Finish 3, 4, and what did I just say? 5 is what we're looking for Thursday. I've heard from a good chunk of you, your introductions, your selfies with your textbook. So thank you guys. I enjoy that part of the class. So thank you for your introductions. If you haven't done it yet, please remember to do so. But otherwise, I think that's all I have to say today. So y'all have a good afternoon. Have a good day tomorrow. Bring your calculators because in your Red Bull or whatever you need. And we're going to jump into math first thing Thursday morning. All right. Come ready. Come prepared. Thank you guys. Have a good evening.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Julie.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. See y'all later.